So we now resume the debate on the second amendment to P80. I think we resume on the speech from Deputy Guida.
Thank you, sir. Now we're coming to the serious part. Now I understand the attractiveness of asking this government to come back to scrutiny and to come back to this assembly to beg for more money. No, it's nice, it gives you a sense of power. And it's nice to keep control, keep the strings of the purse. So I understand that, but this just cannot happen. We know that there's a finance law that says that you can only start a build or any project once it's been financed. So unfortunately, this notion, which is commendable, of saying, well, we'll give you the money a little bit at a time, just cannot work here. I'd like to reiterate that this is the most important vote. This one and the one about the main proposition are the most important vote that this assembly will take, not during its term, but during this generation. This is the biggest project, this is the most important project, and this is the most expensive project that Jersey has taken, I know, since the war, but probably even before that. This is absolutely, absolutely massive. Now, if this amendment passes, again, I need to reiterate what happens. And the notion that it is without consequences, that it is just to push the government to try to save a little bit of money and then be very, very tight with their accounts, just doesn't work. Our planning application is due on the 15th of November. So that's just a little bit more than a month away. And we're talking about an absolutely massive document. Because it's just not a planning application. There's an inquiry, there's a public inquiry following. So we're talking about a very, very sophisticated document that will be dissected by the public, that will be talked to death, that will be looked at the millimeter level. Now, we're on time. We're good. We can have that planning application for the 15th of November. As I said before, it's a matter of days whether we can or not. If there are any changes to the application itself, to the content of the application, it will not happen. We will not have a planning application as put down for the 15th of November. Now, the public inquiry is led by an inspector. We had to book him 9 months in advance. And we were actually quite lucky to find one. It was difficult. It was actually quite difficult to find an inspector of the right caliber who already had some experience of Jersey, because this is a very, very Jersey matter. You cannot come in and compare it to whatever would happen in the UK. We found one. We had to book him 9 months in advance. We found one. If he comes here and there's no planning application, well, if there's no planning application, he's not coming here. There's no inquiry. So days of delay on that planning application means that this particular inquiry is not happening. If the inquiry is not happening, the other important date, which was around the 15th of April, the determination, which is already during PERDA, will not happen. So we will not have decided whether we can have this hospital or not during PERDA. We may have been working on a new planning application during this time, but again, we need to book this planning inquiry, and it takes time. Then we have PERDA, and half of us are not elected, and a completely new assembly comes in, and it takes, as we know, as we've all experienced, it takes at least a month before we have a working government. And well, we can hope that this working government, after having explained to the public why they messed up the hospital the previous time, will start working on a new project, which we'll probably call not our hospital, but maybe any hospital, anything will do, hospital project. Now, what will happen to our contractors in the meantime? So they have a schedule too. And if you're a contractor of that size, it's a schedule that you program years in advance. The big ones, 5, 10 years, because you say, oh, I'm building that stadium, in Saudi Arabia between 26 and 29, and I need 5,000 workers there. And you've got your 5,000 workers booked and all your supply channels and all your engineers booked for those 3 years. So our contractors are the same. They have booked their people, they have booked their supplies, they have booked everything for us for a certain date. If we come back and say, well, we're a little bit late, the project is changing a little bit, don't worry too much, but we're going to be late by about 6 months, if it's only 6 months. Well, I'm sorry, it doesn't fit in their plan. They have, we had 1,000 people programmed for you from 23 to 26, but I'm sorry, if it's going to be 24 to 27, but in 27 we were building one in Germany. So sorry, it doesn't work. So we lose them. Now, these contractors somehow are not very thick on the ground. This time, when we put out this magnificent bid of £400 million, we got 2 offers. 2 people, 2 companies came back and said, it's interesting, it's worth the trouble. Two of them. If we lose that one, considering the immense competition that we have in the rest of the world, and if only in the UK has this immense program of renewing the NHS stock. So even companies that we're very familiar with, that have worked with us in the past, well, they will be too busy in the UK, which is easy. Their people, their workers are there. They don't have to ship them to Jersey. So if we want to have those people again, it's going to be very, very difficult. We will have to be extremely attractive to them. We will have to give them a lot of money and absolutely, gold-plated guarantees before they come back to Jersey. Otherwise, they won't try. And again, think about the planning. Think about saying, I've got 5,000 workers in the world, and I'm putting 2,000 in Jersey for those 3 years. Oh no, it's changed. Oh, it's changed again. We're a little bit late. We're a little bit late. If you could just push it over to 2028 or something, it just doesn't work. It's just impossible. And finding somebody who just has the right amount of workers, machinery, and everything available for those 3 years is very, very difficult. So to say that small changes or a small change is not going to make a difference is ridiculous. And this is not a small change, this is a 30% change. And this is months and months of change. If we really go flat out, a few months, but even a few months, will completely mess up our agenda. And it's not going to be a few months because we have another problem. When we went to see the clinicians, we had something extraordinary for them. We went to see them and we asked them, what do you need? And this is such a wonderful question. This is really a very, very good question to answer. What do you need? They were quite happy because they hadn't been asked that before. No, it was new to them. So we ask them, what do you need in a new hospital? How would it work for you? And they helped us. They really, really helped us. We looked at all the answers. We tried to build something around that. We built something which was, in the end, the same size as the health estate that we have today. So it didn't go wild, but it's very, very good. It's a fantastic project. Now, we're going to go back to them and we're going to say, well, it needs to be 30% smaller. So you guys will have to fight against each other and tell us who's more important, who really needs the extra space, who can do without 50% or 30% of their space. And that's not going to work very well. They'll be tired, they'll be angry that there's an additional delay, and they will not be terribly happy to try to work with us on actually cutting down the size of their workplace. I don't think it will work well. If it works at all, it's going to take years. It's going to take years. Now, the rest of the world is not standing still. So something very weird happened that I didn't predict. I'm quite surprised. But the whole economy was quite depressed during COVID. So everybody knows about that, and we're quite clear with that. But at the exit from COVID, there's this massive economic bump that we're experiencing that we didn't expect. So all of a sudden, there are shortages of everything, including, and that's the most extraordinary, including workers. It's not just us. We have a problem and need to import people. It's the UK. It's France. France doesn't have workers. France with 10% unemployment. Forever 10% employment cannot find workers. There's this massive bump in the economy. That's just that pent-up demand. Nobody's bought anything for 18 months, and now they're all out and they want a new car, a new home, and all sorts of things. It could be convenient. For example, if we borrowed money, well, it was very, very cheap, for example, right now, and all of a sudden we have this inflation because there is so much demand. And inflation pays for your debt. It's another form of free money. If you have debt, if you've got cash, it's not terribly good. But if you have debt, it's fine. It makes your debt go away. If you have a fund, it's fine. The fund follows the inflation. It's based on real estate. It's based on companies. It's based on solid stuff. As long as you don't go too much into currencies, it's quite solid. It follows inflation. So that's fine. But if you try to borrow, your interest rate is going to be much higher. So now we're talking about 15 million pounds interest rate. If we borrow today, well, if we borrow in 18 months' time, it might be 6%. It might be 60 million pounds, might be 55 million pounds every year, just because we've waited and thought that we could do it better. This is an exceptional situation. We are at the absolute bottom of the interest rate curve, with an outlook that only says massive inflation and growth in interest rates. And there's another thing, I keep saying it. We've been waiting for 10 years for the results of quantitative easing to happen. The massive amounts of money have been distributed. There's so much money, people don't know what to do with it. They pay to park it overnight in the Federal Reserve. They've opened up a system to do that, and there's $2.5 trillion parked there because nobody knows what to do with the money. Inflation is guaranteed. There's no stopping inflation. It has to happen. And of course, all these states who have now borrowed even heavier to cover their COVID costs will welcome that inflation. It is the only way for them to pay this debt. And of course, that also means that for us, any cost that we wait to incur is going to be more. So this is a very, very sensitive time. We can borrow for very, very cheap. We have a good fund that can follow inflation, and inflation will help us pay back our loan. But that's now. It's not in 6 months' time. It's not next year. It's right now. In 6 months' time, we might not be able to afford borrowing. So waiting really doesn't help us. And there is no parallel universe where giving somebody 2/3 of the money makes things go faster or as fast. It is not possible. We have to rethink the thing. We have to delay everything. And we're looking at a plan that is precise to the week. If we stop it, if we delay it, it's going to cascade. It gets worse. I'm so sorry. It really gets worse. Gloucester Street, the General Hospital, is in dire straits. We've heard from many people that Gloucester Street was in trouble. Every year, it costs more to maintain. But what we've also looked at is the fact that there will be a point where it's not about maintenance anymore. It's about refurbishment. So there is a date just around 2026 where actually we cannot keep working in Gloucester Street no matter how much money we throw at it unless we start refurbishing it. And that refurbishment is major works. It actually looks like a lot like the town hospital project that we had in 2018. It's hundreds of millions of pounds while we work, while we have patients in town. And when we start spending that amount of money on our existing hospital, there's no more for external projects. We just will not be able to finance something else. So we have this very, very dangerous date where somebody will say, well, that's it. We have too many lawsuits. You know, we've got 100 million pounds of lawsuits waiting because people caught secondary infections and because there's sewage in the rooms and all the sorts of things that are happening now. And we absolutely have to follow regulations and just make this thing legal. And that's hundreds of millions of pounds. And this is not fancy thinking. We actually modeled it. The team that is working on our hospital said, what happens if we do nothing? What happens if for some reason we mess up and then we drop a deadline or something? They said, well, that's it. 2026, that's when Gloucester Street becomes a catastrophe and costs so much money that we have to give up building a new hospital. This is modeled. We can show you the paper if it's not already in your files. So this is really, really serious. Now I'd like to tell you a little Soviet joke. So this is during the time of the Soviet Union. And a district management group is visiting things around a small town in Siberia. And they visit a few schools and they look at a few factories. And of course, every time they go into a school, people are very, very polite, but they do mention the fact that if they could have a little bit more money, you know, life is very, very tough. It's cold. We need a lot of heating. It's very difficult. If we could have more money. And of course, the party cadre just say, well, you know, the Soviet Union is tries its best for all its citizens, but life is tough and the West is not helping us. So we're really sorry we don't have any money. And the last thing that they visit is the local gulag. And of course, the gulag does exactly the same. It's even more decrepit, thank God, than the schools. But the gulag also goes, you know, this is horrible. Our prisoners are dying of cold in the winter. It's really, really bad. You need to do something. And the head of the delegation says, oh, that's fine. Yes, I understand your problem. Here's 5 million rubles. And they drink a lot of vodka, kiss each other, and live in the big Volga limousines. And in the limousine, one of the aides goes, but I don't understand. We've been visiting stuff all day. We saw that school and that situation and that factory and the situation. And why the gulag? And the old Russian apparatchik turned to him and said, Dimitri, what are the chances of us going back to school? Now, this is everybody's hospital. Half of us will have our lives saved in this hospital. You can look it up. Half of us at one point will survive because we have this hospital. Our children, our grandchildren, and nowadays our great-grandchildren will be born in it. To many of us, it will be the last place we see. As I said, this is the most important vote in a generation. And I can understand the attraction of having the government of Jersey come back to you to beg for money. I will beg. I'm happy to beg. Scrutiny, Christina, I beg you, I beseech you not to kill a hospital. What you see from your deathbed might depend on your vote. Now, my sincerity has been questioned, and I'm sure that there are a few, maybe not present in this assembly, that will question it. I can help with that. I will offer a trade. If Reform votes against the amendment and for the proposition, I will give up my political career. I will not stand in the next election. They will have defeated not only their fiercest enemy, but the leader of the largest party in Jersey. And for that, I only ask for one thing. Let our hospital live. Thank you, sir.
Deputy, I've had three members ask for points of clarification, if you would accept them. Deputy. Deputy Guida. Hello.
Sir, yes.
Three members have asked for points of clarification on your speech.
I will try my best.
Constable of St John.
Thank you, sir. Sir, some time ago, it seems, the deputy mentioned that it was more expensive to build flats and houses in Jersey than it is to build a hospital. The government report of 2019, also report for development costs in Jersey, said that the building costs were 2,600. Can you tell us where he gets these figures from?
Well, yes, sir. I happen to be a developer, so it's sort of my job to build stuff. And I've done so in France many times, and I'm finding it very difficult in Jersey because the cost of building in Jersey is more than £5,000 per square meter. So I was there, I was actually present when Altair showed us their report, and they were just comparing figures between London and Jersey, which I didn't accept. And I don't know the basis for those figures, but certainly there is nothing in Jersey that is built for £1,700 per square meter. Just for comparison, I looked at the International Finance Center. So IFC5 costs 37 million and is 6,900 square meters. That's about £5,200 per square meter. And that's the figure I have for building anything that I try to build in Jersey.
Thank you. The next is the Deputy of St Martin.
Thank you, sir. The Deputy in his speech said that an application, if submitted next month, would be looked at by an independent inspector and a decision would be taken during PERDA. The Planning Committee have been told very clearly they will be not taking or not allowed to take any contentious or complicated decisions during PERDA. Can the Minister explain how this hospital will be allowed to be different?
We've actually checked the law, and it is possible for the Environment Minister to make this decision during PERDA, as it is pretty much business as usual, but more importantly, because it is a public inquiry and there is an inspector report.
And Deputy Tadier.
So did I hear the deputy say that he was the leader of the Alliance Party, but when he made his offer to reform Jersey?
Is that your point of clarification?
Well, it is, sir. I think it's important to know, because he's put us a very interesting offer on the table, which could sway the debate, and I wasn't quite sure what his capacity was.
Sorry, what was the question?
I think he was asking whether you are actually the leader of the Jersey Alliance.
Yes, sir, I am officially.
Thank you very much.
I just understood hadn't elected a leader yet, that's all, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, let us move on to the Deputy of Trinity.
Thank you, sir. I'm not sure where I start after the last two speakers. It's going to be very, very difficult to follow through. But I was always told as a youngster and getting on a bit these days that it's much better to go through an experience and explain the experiences. So what I want to do for the next couple of moments is just go through some of the things that I've been through in the past and some of the things that I've been through over the last 3 years with regards to hospital. I'm probably the only person in the Assembly that's been on an NHS board. And I'm probably the only person that has built a wing to a hospital in the UK. I say that because I'll repeat why I'm saying it later on, but that is the whole point of where I'm coming from. And when I came back here and they got me into politics, into Trinity, of course, one of our previous deputies was a health minister. So I had discussions. And when POG was set up, the Chief Minister asked if I would go on the board with POG and said I'd be delighted to, except for one thing. And that was the previous AG, Director General, sorry, of the department said, could I have all the details with regards to the work that had been done over the last 10 years? And from what I'd seen from all the reports, the number of personalities and discussions that went on over the last 10 years is exactly what is happening now. Here we are again in 2021, and we're seeing the same thing. It's about personality, but here we are today discussing something that I will follow on from what the previous speaker said, and that is this is going to be one of the most important buildings that we ever put up. Therefore, you have to use everybody. I think in the past, they made the mistake of not including clinicians and being able to talk to everybody. But I then look back on one of the agendas when we built the wing of a hospital in England. And it's amazing. And I'm going back 25 years. The bottom line of the agenda read, make sure that you take the staff with you. And it's essential that we didn't do that. We didn't do that previously, but we are doing it this time. And then I go out there and here in the square on Tuesday, the number of people that have expertise in almost everything that's to do with a hospital. From building it, directing roads, telling who should be there, where it should go. And yet none of them, I don't think anyone has had the experience, even in the Assembly, to have anything to do with building such a large edifice. The building works, roads, were one of the biggest issues that came out. But the facts that are coming out, we've heard some for, some against, but they're not all correct. And I think what has happened with this debate, it's got personalized into people's feelings. And when you listened in the Royal Square, you would come away thinking, my goodness me, what are we doing here? But one of the points that was raised many years ago was that POG needed to make sure that they had the staff on board. The clinicians were essential to the people, to the hospital being built, and there is no question of it. And then you hear, and then we get emails, then we get letters saying, oh, well, only some of the clinicians have heard, and you get all this confused writings that nobody seems to know what's going on, and you end up with, unfortunately, which I've sat through, and I am a little surprised with some of the comments that have been made, because they're not made about the hospital, they're made about personalities. And I think it's essential that we move away from that. You're either for this amendment or you're against it. We've gone down the route, we've got the builders in place, and we've spoken to as many people as we can speak to. Nobody's been shy about moving away. So we should get on and start to build. We should make sure that this amendment, which I will be voting against, not because I'm a member of POG, but because of the work and some of the experiences that I've seen. The opportunity I've spent talking to clinicians, nurses, has been quite interesting. Now, unfortunately, for personal reasons, I've had to visit 4 hospitals in the UK over the last 4 months. And each of those 4 hospitals were in different parts of the country. I had the opportunity to be able to talk to doctors, clinicians. I had the opportunity to look at the wards, and one particular hospital I visited, they're putting up huge extensions. Some of the figures I'm hearing here about you can build it for 300 million. If you can build an extension for just 300 million, I'm not sure where they're getting their figures from. And I think that it's essential that you understand, all of you understand, that this hospital is going to get more and more expensive the longer we leave it. So what I did, I built up a list of questions. And this I can verify. I built up a list of questions, and each 4 hospitals I went to, I asked very similar questions. How easy is it to get staff? Not easy. And then you get the explanations. People are coming out of university years ago wanting to be doctors. They do the first, second year after their 3rd year, are finding that their friends are earning more and are not staying in the medical profession. That's causing problems. We used to have Australia, New Zealand, the Commonwealth areas providing people wanting to come in, qualify, and they stay here. It's amazing because of COVID and everything else going on, that's decreased. The other thing is, which is one of the things that I did ask, because I was sort of put in the position of being able to ask them, I said, so why aren't they coming here? And the amazing thing was, and if I use 2 countries like Pakistan, India, you can earn just as much by now going back to your own country than you can by staying here and earning. It was a way of earning here. So that was one of the questions I put, and they were virtually all the same answers from those 4 hospitals. The second thing was that most of them knew that we were building a hospital, which did surprise me. And that came about having spoken to Patrick and a few of the other clinicians in our own hospital. The number of people that come over here in their, I get it right, their 6th year, where they come over and just get experience by working in a hospital. But the most essential thing that when they go back is that what they say about our hospital in terms of, it's getting old, isn't it? We want to work in a modern place. We want to be able to know that we've got medical care at the toppest level and that we've got the medical information that we have. The other thing was that we are now going back to after the war, when it was decided that most of the areas, that certain areas of the country built up things like that particular hospital dealt with fire situations or people being burnt. There was another hospital with cardiac. Now, what has happened over the last 20, 30 years in England is that people have tried to do everything. They are now realizing they cannot do everything. Areas of the country now are being split down. You travel a long way to go to make sure you get the right treatment. And the NHS is struggling because they're having to put up with people not only dealing in their own area, but also dealing with areas of where they're coming from. So people will travel to work in a modern hospital, and people will travel to make sure they get the right information and the right medical care. Then we went into this 100,000 population. You could sit down and break down the UK into 100,000 population and find out how many of those areas are doing specific works. And there's very few. because the 100,000 population that we have here, we want to give the best medical advice, but in a lot of cases, we do need to make sure that we can go elsewhere to make sure that our inhabitants get all the right medical advice. The other thing that came out, which I asked, which was all the doctors were agreeing me on, and that is, like any profession you join, the more work you do on a particular aspect of life, the better you become. Therefore, sometimes when you start talking about Jersey, and we were talking about, obviously talking about Jersey all the time, and that is that people aren't going to come here if they're only doing the operations 2 or 3 times a month, as opposed to 10, 15 times a month. And it's essential that we make sure that if we're going to get people here, that we have the ability to provide them with all the facilities we have. The message basically was from those 4 hospitals, and I did learn a lot, was that you should stop prevaricating. You'll only hinder the hospital. The more we delay this hospital, it is urgently needed now. I think the previous speaker was being quite polite, really. We are now going to be in competition, not only for staff, but also for people to come here and live here. And I'll pass on this one about, yes, it's expensive to come here. Are we paying enough salaries? But the point is, people still want to come here to a modern hospital, which is built, which is refreshing to work in, and to make sure that everybody enjoys working here. And now look at the hospital now, and I'll go back, let's say 30 years to, I was asked 9 months ago to sit on a committee or chair a committee, which I don't think many people, I'm not so sure, Minister of Health, I was asked to sit on a committee which is, and it's called the Health and Community Services Operations Performance and Finance Assurance Committee. I'm the only politician that sits on it because I chair it. That committee deals with every aspect of the hospital here in Jersey. And what does it deal with? Money. We have to return our returns on every issue that we're talking about to the Treasury. And as you know, health at the moment is 1.75 million. We're still trying to catch up because we're over budget. So we have to look at everything. I hadn't realized, but we've got something like 25, 30 departments that they deal with. I have this meeting once a month, 3.5 hours. I don't know some of the people that speak, but you're dealing with primary care, prevention, intermediate care, mental health services, adult social services, women, children, family care, surgical services, medical services. That all costs money. We have accountants within the hospital that make sure that we have the money available to provide that. We even have now to have an action tracker and a matters arising. We have a risk assessment like we have in virtually every other state department. What's the risk? And if I tell you the risk is getting worse and worse for the simple reason the building is not capable of dealing with it. As you'd heard before, 2026 was the time we're going to close. I'm going to say now, and there's going to be areas of that hospital that could well be closed prior to that. So what comes out of all of that is that the more we delay, that £800 million is going to be a lot more than what is being suggested is too high today. The second thing is we've got to realize we're never, ever going to be able to provide some of the medical care that some of the people in the square were asking for the other day. And so when you look at the actual cost of actually running the hospital at this present time, added to which you involve things like, and can I just say, we're talking about maintenance here, central heating. We're not just talking about nurses. We're not just talking about clinicians. We're talking about the people that work the trolleys, the whole situation. And when I hear people talking about the hospital as it is, and then I've seen these other 4 hospitals over the last 4 months, I do realize that we're way, way behind. I'll say it because I've said it before about Fort Regent and other places. Jersey has tended to build things but not look after them. The maintenance of some of the buildings, and I'll say schools as well, we build, walk away, we don't maintain. Without mentioning other parts of the island, I could mention some of the things I'm involved in on the sporting side. We've built excellent places, but we've not maintained them. So I will say to you all, finally, look at the costs of running our present hospital. It's going to get worse to maintain it. And I'm not just talking about the healthcare. I'm talking about running a building. And there's a lot of you in here that have experience of running buildings and looking after properties. It is woefully tired. It's out of date. Some places not fit for purpose. And the one thing is that the risk assessments and some of the management situations we're looking at and we're talking to, it is frightening. And I'm not trying to be over dramatic. And that is what I chair. It's not chairing health, which is unusual, because I can go through all the things that we have to look at, and I can list all the things that the medical and clinicians do, but they're all budgeted. Let's make this clear. So please, again, I ask you to please think positively and think before you vote. You're all putting personalities and your own views sometimes and views of other people. But just look at the reality. We need a new hospital. We need this amendment to be defeated purely to get on, because I can assure you that if we don't, the cost of this hospital is going to get more and more and more. And that 800,000 in 5-10 years' time, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be one hell of a lot more. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendments? If no other member wishes to speak, Senator Farnham.
Thank you, sir. There's been some really positive contributions to the debate. It's been quite a heavy debate, but there's been some very positive contributions. For example, we all agree that we want a new hospital as quickly as possible and without further delay. And that's progress. We agree to proceed with the Overdale site. I think we're not, maybe not quite unanimous. We know we have the Progress Party who have a different view. They want to take it back to Gloucester Street. And Deputy Tadyer asked Senator Moore to confirm her position because that was a historic position, but I'm not sure where she stands now on that. But I think we do share the same views in relation to the fact that we must get on with it. We all want to achieve the very, very best possible healthcare and value for future generations. I just want to turn to one speech that I thought was noteworthy, and that is a speech of Deputy Rob Ward at the beginning of the debate, and where he said how important it was for us to come into here with an open mind. And then Reform Jersey actually haven't come in with an open mind. It's odd that they made their position clear and then came in to persuade everybody to have an open mind and listen to the debate. But Deputy Ward also went on to talk about going forward together. And that's what we're all going to have to do at the end of this debate. In the coffee room, sir, chatting to Deputy Ward afterwards, he let out a bit of a secret, because not only is the deputy a very good drummer, sir, but I understand he's taken up crochet in his spare time. And that is, as I understand it, idea was suggested to him by his family, sir, because it was about the only time that he was quiet. So, of course, my ears pricked up in that, and me and a few like-minded states members chipped in, and we've brought the deputy a crochet set, and if I can just pass that to the usher and ask him to send that to Deputy Ward, perhaps he can keep that in his drawer for future state sessions. I have to address some of the accusations. It's probably too strong a word, and actually this is not about being personal. Members will know me. I don't make politics personal. Politics is about good debate. It's about strong debate, and just because we disagree, it doesn't mean we're being personal. We should avoid that at all costs. But I have to challenge. I have to challenge some of what's been said. In the interests of keeping the speech shorter, but it won't be that short, unfortunately. I'll keep it as short as I can. It will involve a bit of repetition, because I want to really push some of these points home. And the first point I want to reiterate, sir, is that the panel's advisors agreed that the budget we were asking for is an appropriate amount to invest in a hospital of this size and scope. And that's clearly stated on page 21 of Curry and Brown's report. So they do go on to challenge whether we need one of this size. We don't dispute that. They state the estimated cost for the preferred new build option has been based on the design and scale which is informed by the schedule of accommodation, sir. And that provided good quality, detailed information. They go on to state that the costs presented for the Reba Stage 2 design are realistic and robust. That's what they said. We've put together realistic and robust budget, sir, with significant allocations for contingencies, sir. And I want to assure members and reassure members that those budgets are being put together robustly, and they will be challenged robustly right through the project. The scrutiny panel's report appended to the amendment does not provide any firm basis for reducing the budget by a third. It doesn't explain how the 550 million figure was selected. And the Chief Minister, I think it was the Chief Minister, said yesterday, sir, and that actually one of the advisors, quoting here, sir, stated, should the revised cash envelope be determined as an example at approximately 550 million, sir. So that's what they've come up with. And I agree with the principle of trying to drive down the costs. But that figure is not properly thought through. If it had been, we would be very pleased to accept the amendment. In fact, we would embrace the amendment if we could work with it without delay. We all want the hospital to be good value for money. But reducing the budget without thorough and sound reasoning or definite plan would result in an unacceptable compromise. The panel's amendment does, however, suggest certain project elements could be revisited. Members have touched on this, reducing the overall size of the hospital, which we have done and continue to do, sir, in the final stages of the design process. Reducing the number of wards, which would lead to fewer beds. And that's a separate debate. We, the bed numbers, we either have too many or we haven't got enough, but reducing the number of wards would mean we had even less. Removing the atriums and what they refer to as a beautification, creating a less peaceful and healing environment. And we've all heard the stories of people getting superb treatment in a general hospital, but in a poor environment, in fact. In days gone by, sir, a member of staff in a conversation said working in the general hospital is like having a hangover without having been to the party the night before. Delaying the build of the knowledge centre, and that would mean we cannot train or advance our staff. Reducing the size of the multi-storey car park, accepting access to the hospital, reducing the level of overheads and profits, which are already at industry acceptable levels for a project of this type, sir. It's a unique project. And rest assured, we will continue to negotiate hard in all of those areas. They suggested we can reduce the amount of land purchased, which is an integral part of the design, sir. And we will only purchase the land and property we absolutely need to deliver the design. And reducing the allowances required for inflation and contingency, which have already been carefully calculated to avoid potential overspends. And the panel's amendment does not seek to explore or understand the very real implication of revisiting these elements. Reducing the budget would mean that a new hospital for Jersey would not be deliverable by 2026. And that's the time, sir, when costs to maintain the estate will escalate sharply. A reduction in budget at this stage would cause further delay and have significant consequences, which would increase the overall cost of the project. I think we all have to understand that. That would adversely affect the financing costs, increase the inflationary impact, increase the uncertainty. So if we, for example, if supporting the amendment today led to a delay of 2 years, which is very likely with the best will in the world, we have another 2 years of inflation to consider. In this uncertain world, sir, in this post-Brexit uncertain COVID world, sir, we can see that inflation, construction inflation is running high. We've highlighted that. We've allowed for it. But you add another 2 years on of just construction inflation, and that's probably the best part of £100 million onto the project for the delay. So just in that is not taken into account. For example, interest rates are at an historic low. Borrowing at a fixed rate as set out in our proposition provides certainty. It inflation proofs the bond repayments. If interest rates rise, the bond repayments would not rise. They're fixed. Investment returns will cover annual financing costs, and growth in reserves will repay the capital, sir. And I would like to refer to the speech of the Deputy of St Mary and acknowledge the Deputy's observations about endowment mortgages. But this situation is just not the same. We already have significant reserves in place, significant reserves, against which the proposition suggests borrowing, which leaves considerable headroom once it has been fixed. And as acknowledged by Deputy Johnson, our past performance of investment returns is excellent. And I, sir, and many other members remain confident in the thorough and sophisticated modelling undertaken by our investment advisors, which provides assurance that we will be able to meet our targets. And for fear of repeating comments made by the Treasury Minister yesterday, even in a stress scenario, there is a 97.9% probability that the strategic reserve will be able to repay the debt when it falls due. So now, I'm not a gambling man, but actually those odds, you have to admit, are pretty strong. Actually, sir, rather ironically, I think Deputy Ward's crocheting. Actually, and ironically, sir, the cost of maintaining our current health estate will end up being higher than the annual interest payments of the bond if we don't act soon. That would be an interesting state of affairs to explain to islanders. We didn't take the bond because we were worried about meeting the bond repayments, but actually the cost of maintaining the estate is higher. The panel suggests that the building size could be reduced, but again, they've provided no clinical or professional advice to support the statement. I don't believe the panel have had any formal conversations with the clinicians about this or the healthcare staff. The overall building size has already been reduced, and this has been achieved as a result of detailed consultation with our clinicians. And of course, members have seen the revised design plan, sir. And as I said earlier, we will continue to make sure the hospital is no bigger than it needs to be, sir, to maintain our clinical security and services and adjacencies. And the concept designs for our hospital have been approved and endorsed by the Clinical and Operational Client Group, the Health and Community Services Executive Committee, the Medical Staffing Committee, and all, sir, clinical service user groups. They've all approved the designs. Jersey clinicians and healthcare professionals have spent well over 1,000 hours of workshop time to hone and refine the design to ensure there will be adequate clinical space and efficient clinical adjacencies, far more efficient than we've ever seen. This will ensure that modern and best healthcare practices can and will be employed at all times to serve the health needs of islanders. Our clinicians are also acutely aware that there are financial constraints, and they have worked to those in partnership with the clinical director and our project team to ensure that the clinical requirements are realistic and will provide good value for money, sir, over the long term, over the life of the asset. We've been criticised, sir, over staff strategy and facilities maintenance. But to maintain the very tight targets of delivery, we're having to run a number of work streams in parallel. But that actually doesn't take anything away from the process, because the staffing strategy and facilities maintenance are iterative processes. We couldn't put in place now a staffing structure that's going to be spot on for a new hospital that opens in 4 years from now. It's impossible to do, because the way we work is continuously evolving. But they work on their staffing structures regularly. And I can absolutely assure members that by the time the new hospital is open, the continued evolution of our staffing structures and staffing strategy will have evolved to make sure it fits absolutely perfectly into the new hospital. And as for facilities maintenance, saying we don't even know how much it's going to cost to run the hospital, so I'm afraid is another red herring. Because at the moment we have a very disparate health estate. We have facilities maintenance programs for 10, 20, 30 different properties. And one thing that this does do, as we all know, it consolidates all of our health estate into one site. So, and we know that will present many advantages, many clinical advantages, many logistical advantages, and it will create advantages when we come to our facilities management. Now, we don't know if it's going to be a bit more or a bit less, but we know it's not going to be a lot more. We know it's not going to be a lot less. And it's not a risk. We don't consider not having those details now a risk, because, again, we're going to take a lot of time working that out to make sure we have the facilities maintenance programs in place at the right time that deliver the best value for money. I'm just turning to some comments made by my good friend, the Constable of St. Brelard, who had the decency to say I was a very nice chap. But then he went on to say the project was out of control, and that again is another red herring. That's what we've seen thrown at us by a number of people, not just members, but members of the public, sir. And I make no criticism of the campaign groups. I disagree with a lot of what they say. I think some of their facts are confused and simply not correct, but I make no criticism of them. I welcome that sort of engagement in our democracy. But to say that the project is out of control, I'm sorry, is simply not correct. We have followed a superb process, unlike any other iteration of the project. We have a brilliant and dedicated team of officers working on this, and we have an absolutely committed political oversight group. Now, I'm sorry if we come up with some things that members don't like, but that doesn't mean the project is out of control. And I'm sorry if people feel the communications, or we haven't managed to sort of get the whole island behind us, because this is a huge challenge. It's not easy. It's not easy to build an asset of this size and bring everybody on board, because it's a hugely complicated project, and it is difficult. It is difficult to share that understanding, the detail that we have with the public, especially when there are orchestrated campaigns against it. And again, so I want to reiterate, I make no criticism of those islanders who quite rightly challenge us on these sort of things. We've been accused of holding guns to the head of members and scaremongering, but in the same breath, the Constable of St Brelard said we are going to be saddling our children and our grandchildren with a great deal of debt. And I think that, again, sir, I'm afraid to say, is an over-exaggeration and is tantamount to scaremongering future generations. If we were to spend our reserves, in the way suggested by the scrutiny panel, we would also be saddling our children and our grandchildren with a far smaller pot of reserves in 40 years from now. So let's not go there. I don't do personality politics, as members should know. But please don't take these comments personally, Constable. I'm a nice chap, not all the time, but this is purely a debate in which I disagree and want to point out the reason why. We've also, it's also been claimed that spending isn't being managed properly, and that's another area I want to reassure members on. Just bear with me. Where will I turn to my electronic support system? I mean, we have followed Green Book guidance, and that's what Green Book is. It's guidance, and we're working in line with our own public financial manual and the very best practice, and that dictates how we manage expenditure, the costs of this project. And Senator Gorst covered that briefly, and I believe the Treasury Minister has as well. But I think in answer to scrutiny panel questions at a recent public hearing, the Treasury, either Treasury officials or the Treasury Minister, I'm sorry, I'm not sure who, explained that we were establishing a framework around the authorization of the use of the contingency funding as an example of how Treasury are going to work to exert cost control around the project. And the intent is for Treasury officials involved in the various levels of the project to be given clear direction to ensure challenge of costs, and in particular proposals to utilize the client contingency are robust, and in assisting the accounting officers to fulfill their responsibilities for value for money, and of course assisting our cost consultants on the project support with this additional rigor. And we have a whole we have chapter and verse on exactly how that is going to be done, which I'm sure the Treasury will serve with members. I would like to go through it now, but I do not want to extend the speech for too long. But it's all there, sir, and it's the governance is very rigorous. The significant majority of clinicians and nurses employed by Health and Community Services are in support of the current plans for our hospitals set out before us. But the possibility of yet more indecision and delay has led these groups to take the unusual step of publicly expressing, through open letters to states members, their frustration at the support for the current project plans and the proposition before us today. And I'm not surprised they are frustrated, sir. Reducing the budget by over 30% without adequate explanation or justification would completely undermine all of the good work they have done over the last 18 months. And as I've said, 1,000 hours plus of meetings, of hours spent, hundreds of meetings, literally, sir. And this would cause a significant risk of disengaging and disenfranchising the medical staff. And of course, our other partners and professional teams as well. Now that is a risk that would be created if we supported the amendment today. Clinicians and healthcare staff support is vital for the success and the delivery of the new hospital, and losing their support at this stage would be challenging. No, it wouldn't be challenging, sir. It would be quite devastating for the project, as history has taught us. The design has been clinically led and is agreed as appropriate for Jersey and our unique island context, sir. And I say that again, we have a unique island context here when we look at what we want to use our hospital and health estate for. Because as I said before, we are having to build at least 5 hospitals into one building or into one campus. So it's a general hospital. It's an acute and specialist hospital, ambulatory services, women, maternity and children, and of course, adult and children's mental health services. And that uniqueness, sir, in our island context is almost incomparable with any other project we can find. And we have been compared against all sorts of other hospitals. Senator Moore, in her opening speech, sir, spoke about a new build hospital in Madeira. But what she didn't say is that the health service of Madeira comprises of 3 public hospitals, might be 4 with this new one, I'm not sure, but of at least 3 public hospitals and 48 public healthcare centres. Now that's not exactly a fair comparison, sir. And I don't know, I haven't seen the granular detail. I mean, if we wanted to build a big square building in the middle of town with 500 beds in it, we could probably beat that price. I don't know. It's almost impossible to compare a hospital build without all of the granular detail, sir, in just about every single project. The scrutiny amendment requires the budget to be capped at £550 million, sir, inclusive of optimism bias, client contingency and other site-specific costs, including the road improvement and the reprovision of services and land acquisition, sir. I've already explained briefly the impact of inflation over and above that on a delay. But let me just be absolutely clear as to why there will be a delay. And I'm sorry again to repeat this, but it really needs to be hammered home. At the heart of all the work we've done over the last 2 years is the ambition to get our planning application in. Originally it was September, and because of the delay and the requirement from the Assembly to have another debate on access, we had to push that date to November. And that's driven us, that's driven the whole project, because that's the very latest date we can put the planning application in without jeopardizing our end of project target, which is the end of 2026. Now, if we don't do that, and this amendment passes, sir, absolutely clear, we can't just go into a room and put up a diagram of the hospital and put lines through a few things and mess around with the design, sir. It has to be a lot more complicated than that, I'm afraid. as I said, we spent about 18 months on this design. And the requirement to say take off 2,000 square meters would mean we have to redesign 2,000 square meters, try and fit that 2,000 square meters into other parts of the hospital, or decide what we have to take out. And I'm mindful of comments made by members in relation to the health minister's speech. So, but that is a fact. We can't, if we're going to compromise this, we have to compromise that. So that means we have to have a bit less of what our clinicians have said they need. Not everything, what they need and what they want is different, sir. But we've got a really, really good plan. And that involves a lot of detailed work in redrawing it. So it would look like this, sir. We would have to redraw that, which would mean we couldn't get our detailed planning application in November. Now, we'd have to go back to the team. The team would have to go back to the clinicians, and we'd have to start that process again. The estimates we've had from the team is we'd look at 18 months. But even if that took a year, it's still a year onto the project timing, at least. And of course, that would push the delay into the next assembly. And I'll come back to that, sir. But we've talking about detail. We've also been criticised for the lack of detail. And I'm sorry about that, because again, I refute that. We have provided hundreds of pages of good quality detail, and scrutiny should accept that. They might not like the detail, or they might want more detail, in which we will endeavour to provide everything that they ask for. And I mean, I've got a folder here, sir. If we look at that, and I refer to the high level figures, Deputy Guida went through them and other members have referred to them. I think Deputy Southern did as well. Behind all of those figures, sir, sits a huge amount of detail. And I'm looking at it now. I'm looking at every single composite window, every single WC, sink, basin, light fittings. It's all here, everything in there and costed, sir. And we've done that for the whole project. And the information is available. And if anybody wants to look at it, we'd be pleased to provide it. It is, and scrutiny have had it. So I really do challenge the fact that they said we haven't produced enough detail, because we've produced a lot of detail. But if they want more detail, let us know what they want, and we will provide it for them, sir. I hope we're going to have a constructive dialogue with scrutiny moving forward, because we're at stage 3 of a 7-stage or 8-stage project, sir. So we've got a lot of work to do together. But if we push this into the next assembly, we don't know that we're not going to get tied up in debates about the location again. The Progress Party, sir, have made it clear about their intentions, and members will have to find that concerning. So we want to try and avoid that. We want to try and get this. We want to try and keep the momentum going of this project, sir, so that the role of the next government will be able to pick up with that momentum and push forward, sir, without having the opportunity to want to go back and start again. The scrutiny panel's amendment, if approved, as I said, sir, would require a rework of just about every aspect of the project. Can we really afford to go backwards at this late stage? I don't think we can. And my opening remarks, I talked about the cost versus value, and the value that will provide dignity and better care, and value that will save lives, sir. Deputy Morel gave a speech about the future. Deputy Morel, he's the Assistant Minister in my department. Good, I like to think, good, strong working relationship, and I respect his views. He's a deep thinker, sir. And he talked about the future in an uncertain world. I don't blame him. No one could have predicted what's happened to us recently, and no one can accurately predict how the world is going to change, just as we've seen it changed in the decades, in the last century, in the century before that. But we have all managed to evolve, sir, and improve. And we can't hide from the future. We can't be paralyzed by the fear of what it has in store for us. We have to embrace it, sir. And this project does embrace the future. And after almost a decade of indecision and delay and escalating costs, sir, we now stand on the brink of delivering our new hospital. A hospital, sir, that is right for Jersey. And we should make it right together. A hospital, sir, that can be and will be fully operational by the end of 2026. I could not even contemplate the islanders' reaction should we let them down again. We must all remember the last elections and the hustings, sir. And just about everyone was dominated by this issue. So let's not step back, sir. Let's keep the momentum going forward. So a vote for the amendment, whether we like it or not, is a vote for delay. Whether it's a delay of a year or 2 years or 3 years, it is a vote for delay. There's no way around that. But let's keep the momentum going, sir. Please, for the sake of future generations of islanders, I ask members to reject the amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to say we've been joined in the public gallery by His Excellency Mr. Bob Al-Houl, the Ambassador of the United Arab Emirates, and we welcome him to the islands and to our chamber. And I hope you have an excellent stay, sir. Next to speak is the Constable of St. Lawrence.
Thank you, sir. Sir, on Monday evening, I spent 4 hours in A&E with a family member, during which time I began to prepare for this debate. I wrote then that I was undecided on this amendment, adding that I was sure I wouldn't be the only member to find themselves in that situation. When the Constable of St. Peter spoke yesterday, he almost took the words out of my mouth, but it was pleasing to be assured that at least 2 of us had come to the debate with open minds, and we heard earlier from Deputy Truscott that he too was in that position. So I have paid particular attention to what members have said during the debate, finding myself, as I do often, swayed first in one direction and then in another. I was particularly struck by the speech of the Health Minister when he referred to end-of-life patients passing away with nothing but a plastic curtain to give them and their loved ones privacy at such a time. It occurred to me that although we do not yet know the content of the proposition on assisted dying, I am certain that there will be reference to the appropriateness of the physical environment required to allow for assisted dying to be undertaken with dignity. And yet, that dignity is not guaranteed to those who pass away now in our hospital. That is a shocking situation that we are all obliged to acknowledge is happening and continues to happen. Some 6 years ago, I was visiting in a 6-bay ward with no empty beds, and every patient had visitors. We were all aware that in the end bed, farthest from the door, a family was gathered to be with their mother during her last moments. The drawn plastic curtain could not hide their distress, a distress they attempted to conceal by smothering their cries. Just as everyone else in that ward, staff, patients and visitors, attempted to give them privacy by not speaking during those final moments. And I will never forget how we all looked away as they finally left the ward, walking past us all in as dignified a manner as they were able, leaving their mother behind that curtain. What an awful situation. What an awful experience for everyone in that ward, particularly the elderly patients who were all of a similar age to the deceased. I'm eternally grateful that when I lost my own mother a week later, there had been a single room available for her to leave with the dignity that she and we all deserve. I am ashamed that the condition of our current hospital perpetuates, in some instances, death without dignity. During Monday's briefing, in answer to a question I had asked, we were told that 40% of our population have private health insurance. I was astounded at that figure, but yet it leaves some 60,000 plus of us relying on the health and medical care provided by the state through the auspices of the hospital. And what we know without doubt is that that care is delivered in conditions that fall far below acceptable standards. We know that our health professionals are stretched, that they are constrained by the conditions in which they work, and yet they all strive to deliver the best care that they can in those, quite frankly, appalling circumstances. We have heard directly from them in letters from both clinicians and nurses. I have taken the opportunity to meet with Ben Hughes, the urologist who facilitated the open letter to us from his fellow clinicians. He told me that he had joined the hospital in 2014, now 7 years ago, and that conditions at that time were poor. During the past 7 years, he has seen those conditions deteriorate, and he has seen his colleagues and all health professionals become more and more frustrated at the impact the conditions have on their ability to deliver acceptable standards of healthcare. They struggle to maintain the high standards that they wish to deliver and which we, the public, expect and, dare I say, deserve. We pay our taxes. We expect first-class care. So that brings me from a moral argument for getting on with the build at Overdale to the financial question. Do we support the amendment as so well argued by Senator Moore, or do we not, as so well argued by Senator Le Fondre? And here I must pay tribute to the scrutiny panel for the report they have prepared for us and for their contributions to this amendment debate. I agree with Deputy Tadyer, who made it clear that it is not the job of scrutiny to identify any physical areas or the clinical and medical deliverables that would need to be reduced or scrapped altogether if we support Part A of the amendment. Part A being to agree a maximum expenditure cap for our hospital to project completion of up to £550 million. That cannot be exceeded without further approval from the States Assembly. But to quote from the scrutiny report, crudely, this would be setting a lower cost envelope that the clinicians would need to revise expectations around. Crudely, this would be setting a lower cost envelope that the clinicians would need to revise expectations around. And yet here we are, with proposals for a hospital that have been reached following close consultation with those same clinicians, who have identified everything that should be included within the new hospital, everything that is needed to deliver the first-class standards of healthcare that we expect, in 2021 and beyond. So what do the island taxpayers want for their money? I have been lobbied by a small number of people who have asked that I support the amendment. I have been lobbied by a small number of people who have asked that I don't support the amendment. I have not heard, of course, from the silent majority. They remain silent. But, as both Senator Moore and Senator Farnham know, I make up my own mind. I vote in this Assembly, having made best endeavours to read all documents, to attend briefings, to question, to listen to debate. Most members have now spoken. We have heard excellent speeches in favour and against. Deputy Guida's speech was powerful. It was, I think, the most thought-provoking we have heard. He too touched on end-of-life experience. Sir, he and others who have referenced the risks that we face if we delay the first spade in the ground at Overdale have been able to persuade me that those risks of going back to the drawing board, of increased costs to build, of impacting detrimentally on staff morale, of deteriorating conditions in the General Hospital, of increased costs to tackle those deteriorating conditions, of the risk to patients, of the risk that we will lose some health professionals, of the risks that parts of the current hospital will close, of the risk of losing the project team, and as importantly, that we risk continued death without dignity. Those risks would not be mitigated by supporting this amendment. Rather, they would be increased, they would be heightened. Accordingly, sir, I cannot support the amendment. Thank you.
Deputy Higgins.
Thank you, sir. I came to the Assembly yesterday genuinely uncertain how I was going to vote on the amendment and the substantive proposition itself. I've listened to the 1.5 days of debate we've had up to now and heard some very good speeches from both sides of the argument, and some that I found worrying and others that were based on lifelong beliefs which I think are out of date in the modern world. I, like the Constable of St. Lawrence and others have said, have swung one way and the other during the debate. I've also been lobbied, not only from people from outside the states, but also from both sides of the states. But as all members know, I'm a truly independent, free-thinking member of this Assembly and make my own mind up. So the lobbying efforts were wasted. So what concerns me and what will sway my decision? Delay. One of the factors that does worry me is the prospect for delay in the hospital project, which to my mind has already gone on for far too long. And we've all heard about the state of the current hospital, which needs to be addressed as soon as possible. A number of members have stated that the government has put a gun to their head when they say that if the amendment is adopted, it will delay the project by 18 to 24 months. I don't accept this argument, as I believe there is a very good prospect of delay, whether it is 18 to 24 months. And I can't say what the delay will be, but I personally fear a delay of just 8 months, which could lead to the project going on for much longer or being totally derailed. Why? Because we have a general election in 8 months' time, which could open up the entire hospital debate again, which could lead to longer delays and certainly to much greater cost. We know the island is divided on this issue, and any delay will give all sorts of individuals and groups the opportunity for mischief. Much of the opposition from outside the Assembly is about the Overdale site itself. I was one of only 5 members of the Assembly to vote against the Overdale site for the future hospital. I personally felt we were stitched up on the site selection process, in the sense that the 5 options that were put forward would almost certainly lead to Overdale being selected, as all the constables and deputies in the 11 other parishes would vote for it, as it wasn't going to be in their backyard, and they wouldn't have to face the problems associated with it. I personally would have preferred Warwick Farm or the waterfront, but it was not to be. And as a Democrat, I have accepted the state's vote, and I don't want to waste time and money revisiting it. I want to get the best hospital we can as soon as possible. Others, however, do want to revisit it, including the Progress Party in this Assembly, as we've heard this morning from their 2 sitting members, Senator Pallas and Deputy Luce. The latter saying that the original plans are further advanced than where we are at the moment and will be cheaper. It's also been said that this is now their party policy, and I've heard that they'll be fielding as many as 40 candidates throughout the island. Now, I voted against the General Hospital site originally, and if re-elected, would vote against it again, as it's totally unsuitable for what we need. And I like the campus hospital proposals that are being put forward at the present time. I would also rather not have to go through that debate again. I also agree with Senator Farman, and I'd like to understand Senator Moore's position on the Overdale Hospital. Is she agreed that it's the correct site, or will she join others and be seeking an alternative site if the current hospital project is delayed? I hope she will answer this question in her summing up. I thought Deputy Guida's speech was a tour de force, and I know from personal experience how correct he was, and I found nothing that I disagreed with. And in fact, in the 3.5 years we've been in the Assembly, he's been in the Assembly, I've grown to admire him and for his clear thinking and research. Deputy Guida in his speech mentioned that projects like this are planned out with detailed timetables, where each piece of the project is placed in a timeline, which follows a logical process and identifies critical steps that need to be taken and in which order. This is known as critical path analysis and is the key to a successful project completion. What seem like minor delays can quite literally put a spanner in the works and cause excessive delays and/or cause costs to increase exponentially. I can say this with confidence, as in a former career I worked as a professional buyer for Sir Alfred McAlpine, one of the largest construction companies in the UK at that time, at their head office in the UK, and I worked on major national and international projects such as hospitals, motorways, sports stadium, and oil pipeline projects. What he also said about national and international contractors and the scheduling of their work and the impact of delay is totally true. I saw contracts that ground to a halt and had to be abandoned. I applaud Deputy Guida for his explanation of the £181 million contingencies. I won't repeat them. What he said was very clear, and I concur with what he said. No matter what project you have to have sufficient contingencies, which as the project advances will be whittled down to specific figures. I also happen to believe that the checks and balances that the Treasury should be putting in to monitor the expenditure will ensure that no money is spent that is not absolutely necessary and will ensure no featherbedding. And I'm quite convinced that scrutiny will be monitoring this like a hawk. Now, many others outside the states and inside the states are concerned with the cost and method of finance, and I'll come to this now. There are some people, like Deputy Morell, who are absolutely hate the thought of borrowing. However, in this day and age, it's impossible to finance any major project without it. And in fact, it's stupid not to in certain circumstances, such as the situation we find ourselves at the moment. Who, for example, in Jersey, can afford a house? I don't think I could if I was starting out again on the salary of a states member. If I could borrow, I don't believe I could even borrow. But people can't afford out of their income and savings to buy a house on its own. They have to borrow. And many major projects will have to resort to borrowing as well. And I do believe, and I've stated it time and time again, our failure to deal with the housing crisis has been criminal. Now, I'm convinced that what the government is proposing to finance this project is the right way to go. And again, I'm going to repeat some of what's been said, but because we can borrow at exceptionally low interest rates at fixed rates for 30 to 40 years. Now, this is, I think, was stated by, again, Deputy Guida. We are in a unique situation at the moment, but as each month goes by, the window of opportunity is receding. And if it does recede, it will add to the cost of financing the project. Now, interest rates are expected to increase possibly from the end of this year. Why? Because we're seeing many problems in supply chains because of COVID and other factors which are going on around the world, which is starting to push up costs. Hence, we're starting to see the start of cost push inflation. Now, part of this is because of worker shortages, we have to pay more in wages to attract staff, and this pushes up costs. So people who've been exceptionally poorly paid in the past may be getting higher wages, hopefully closer to a living wage. And I actually welcome that. I think we treated our workers appallingly, and many of them have been exploited. And certainly with the cost of living in this island, it's absolutely essential that they can earn more, but we will experience inflationary pressures. Now, Deputy Guida also made a very good point, and that is that future inflation will actually help us to repay this debt. It's a fact that the basic rule of inflation is that it causes the value of a currency to decline over time. In other words, cash now is worth more than cash in the future. Thus, inflation lets debtors pay lenders back with money that is worth less than it was when they originally borrowed it. Let me just give an example of that. If you go out and buy a dishwasher today for £500, then that's what it's going to cost you. But if you borrow it over time, let's say you borrow it over the 30 odd years, the £500 you're going to pay is actually worth, in real terms, i.e. what it can purchase at that point, maybe £50. Okay, so what we're trying to say is inflation erodes what you have to pay back in real terms. Now, a number of people have mentioned we're landing our children and grandchildren with a debt going forward. Now, the hospital is an investment that will pay for itself, not only from the returns from our Strategic Reserve Investment Fund, but also in terms of the care it will give our citizens. Is it a burden on children? I personally believe it will be an asset to our children and their children going forward in ensuring their future health and well-being. Now, Deputy Morell, for example, was against borrowing, and he quoted an earlier statement by the Chief Minister, who's now changed his view about borrowing because of the particular circumstances we have. And he said, this is Deputy Morell, that debt is addictive. And he was worried about all the risks that will occur over the 30 to 40 years, which will impact on our ability to repay the interest and capital at the end of it. And he gave examples such as Russia and Crimea. He mentioned inflation and interest rates. Now, the truth matter is we live in uncertain times. And for example, I think I'm more concerned about an asteroid hitting the Earth and wiping us out, or the fault on the island of Las Palmas dropping into the ocean and causing a tsunami, which will spread out over the Atlantic and flood most of the east coast of the United States, possibly Jersey and the south coast of the UK. There are many things that are risks. Some of them may or may not happen. Now, economic risk. Yes, I agree. We can have various crises. We had the 2008 financial crisis caused by the banks. And I make no apologies for saying that it was caused by the banks and the subprime mortgage market, starting in the States, spreading to the UK, and the drying up of liquidity. Yes, we will have things like that, the same as COVID will come. But as I think Deputy Guida or others mentioned, we are borrowing the money over a long period of time, And as long as we allow our investments not to be sold off to try and minimize a loss, but take a long-term view, then we are likely to find that the interest we receive over that 30 to 40 year period will cover the debt. And if not, then we have to look at the situation then. But what's the alternative? The alternative is to use our strategic reserve now and either pay for it entirely, which I think would be a waste, especially with the prospects for growth over the next 30, 40 years, or do again, borrow a lower sum and then use part of strategic reserve. I think that's going to be a problem. It'll end up costing us more, quite simply because of the fact that we'll pay more in interest rates for the later sums that we go for. We have a particular window of opportunity. Now, I believe we should take it. Now, one thing I learned when I studied economics, I have an economics degree, is that in the long run, we're all dead. 30 to 40 years is a long time forward. Yes, I will be here, and now will I think the vast majority of members of the States be here in 30 to 40 years' time. I don't want to saddle our children and grandchildren with debt, but I genuinely believe that this is the best way of financing this project. I do believe we must grasp it. Now, there are some people in the States who have a total anathema to borrowing. And unfortunately, they have opposing economic views to mine. I can remember when I came in the States, how they insisted that the budget, states' income and expenditure balance every year, which meant that we had underinvestment in housing. The housing minister gave all the money he received from rents into the treasury at the time and spent no money on the housing stock, which led to us having houses that were unfit to live in. And that had to be rectified by agreeing to a bond for £250 million to cover the repair of the houses and also to build new ones. It also led to unnecessary austerity and a widening in the income inequality in this island, and the poor getting poorer and the middle classes, middle groups also getting poorer. Now, Senator Gorse, for example, is supporting the borrowing for the hospital, but he stated he will not be supporting borrowing in the government plan. And I know there are others who feel like him, and there will be big battles going forward as to the future of the island, what we can afford to do and can't do. Deputy Ward convinced the states that we have a climate emergency and we have to try and do things by 2030. How are we going to cover the insulating of properties, the building of sea defences, and all the other things that we've got to do to try and alleviate the climate emergency? The truth of the matter is we can't do it by just expecting the citizen to pay more for this, that and the other. We can't do it by raising taxes. We're going to have to borrow for some of the things we want. So for all those who hate the thought of borrowing, get used to it. You're going to have to do some in the future. Otherwise, you won't be able to do what we need to do in this island to deal with these particular aspects. So I think I spent most of my time during this debate just listening and jotting down points, not particularly writing a speech. I think I've made the two main points that I want to make. I believe that if the amendment is passed, it will cause delay. Not only do I think it will cause delay, it will bring us into the election. And as I say, I can see the whole hospital project unraveling, and all those who want us to go to another site getting in on that. And with the new composition of the states, it may well happen. And where will we be? We've already spent probably, I don't know, 70 million, 100 million on hospital projects to date and got nothing. Are we going to write off that money? Are we going to delay things for more years while we debate endlessly the hospital, which will cost us more simply because of the delay and the advance of prices and inflation? No, I think we've got to make a decision now. And although I do find some aspects of what the government had told us over time confusing or inadequate, I do believe that we need to go ahead with this project and not delay. Every one of us will have to answer for how we vote today. I'm prepared to, I'll stand by it. I'm going to stand for election and I'll defend my attitude and my actions. Others will have to as well. But let us make a decision. Let's get this hospital and let's go forward with it now. Thank you, sir.
Next to speak is Deputy Pamplin.
Thank you, sir. As members can probably hear, I'm still struggling with my cold or flu, but that's why I've waited to go last, because I want to see if I can have some sort of voice. So I'll be as brief as possible. This has got nothing to do about me. This is about the future and what the island needs in terms of hospital delivery. And this is the debate that we should have had when we debated Overdale as the preferred site choice. There was no debate then, and that, I don't live life with regrets, but that will be one I'll walk away from the assembly shaking my head. We should have had that debate, we didn't. So there has been an element that we're having that debate today. That aside, like the last two previous speakers, I am totally independent. I'm not a member of a party. I've had a conversation with Senator Moore this week and Senator Farnham, and I've attended all briefings and I've listened to what everybody said. I am, of course, part of the scrutiny panel who scrutinises health. And I was also the chair of the first scrutiny review panel of the Future Hospital Project that led to the rescindment debate that we had. And at that time, my panel, we had to pick up what was left from the previous panel and the previous assembly and look at where we were then and what the new chief minister and the team was proposing and how things were going. It became very clear that the biggest issue was delay and the costs that were coming down the line. In 2015, a sites option appraisal was undertaken by Gleeds Management Service, the then lead advisor to that future hospital project, to review the viability of 4 site options proposed for the location of the new general hospital. The appraisal included the Overdale site appraised by the Assistant Chief Minister then, and the report found that the capital cost of building at Overdale was likely to be 434 million, and that was in 2015. That, of course, did include the various changes that were brought forward, as back then there wasn't the mental health unit and other things, and obviously inflation and the other things that people have mentioned. But I thought it was important to mention that we have been here before. We also noted in our report back then that the then Assistant Minister at the time came out on a media report to say that Overdale was looking like the preferred choice. I'm paraphrasing it a little bit, and he expected the new hospital to cost less than the current project as well, believing that the project back then could begin at the end of the year. We obviously raised questions to that as well. And then we had the processes that other people have outlined it. I just wanted to bring that into the equation because I hadn't heard it before. Lastly, my thinking on this is based on my experiences for the last 3 years, and also what I've heard from experts who've been taking part in this debate. In 2000, after the election, before, as members know, before I took the oath of office, I had a visit to Orchard House, the mental health inpatient facility, and as I've said many times before, was completely flabbergasted with what I saw was the service that we were providing to people at their most critical need. That building is still not fit for purpose, and as we're hearing, has been stretched because it's been housing under 18-year-olds, which is just not acceptable. That facility is still in place now. The replacement facility that we argued for with our scrutiny report and was agreed by this government, and work was then started pre-pandemic and obviously continued despite the challenges, I'm hearing is now delayed again. It's just not acceptable. It's just not acceptable. We don't have a place for young people who are struggling with their mental health. It's just not acceptable. We have young people on Robin Ward who shouldn't be there dealing with things they shouldn't be dealing with, but they are. It's just not good enough. The future of healthcare, as many have said, is rapidly evolving. as we've seen with the recent mortality report that came out in 2020, which was very interesting, obviously, because it was a year of a pandemic. It was the lowest rates of mortality since 2014. But the biggest impacts, of course, once again, was cancers and cardiovascular and other illnesses. And of course, COVID was there as well. But mental health was there as well. And also creeping up year on year is the impact of dementia and Alzheimer's. Our healthcare delivery is changing. It's changing quicker than any of us realise. But at the same time, so is modern medicine and digital works. Other jurisdictions around the world were a lot quicker than Jersey. They saw this happening. Gibraltar updated their hospital, an island, in 2003. The Isle of Man as well, 2003. Other islands have done similar, the Isle of Wight. Now, I talk about islands because my view on this is it's unfair to compare to mainland hospitals because it's different. We're islands, we have challenges. One thing we should be looking towards is the hospital that's very close to us in Guernsey. And how can Jersey and Guernsey continue working like this for the future? One for another day. So here I am in this debate looking at the finances of this project. And as others have said, the potential delay. So I look forward to hearing from Senator Moore's summing up, because I am yet to make my mind up. I'm waiting to hear this summing up like I usually try and do. But one last thing. I volunteered myself to spend a whole 24 hours off my own back 2 years ago to learn how the hospital works. I spent a full 24 hours. I clocked in at 7 o'clock and I just shadowed the team. I didn't really want to make a big deal of it. Of course, I did share the information I was finding through social media and the panels. But the one thing that was clear, the building's the building, but the building and the hospital is our staff, those staff. I saw with my own eyes, they're going above and beyond, and they're going above and beyond more than they need to, because they're in the position that this project should have been dealt with years ago. I saw at 3 o'clock in the morning decisions being made because an islander came into the hospital complaining of an illness, and within 90 minutes he passed away. They had to transform a whole hospital ward to make sure they had the dignity to do so, but also that they could give him the care that he and the family were needing. Staff members were called in, staff members carried on working. It was unbelievable. I then saw a reporter go down to go and get the medical records and bring them up on a co-op shopping trolley. We just got to get this done. So whatever the outcome of this, no more. Our island deserves better. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendments? If no other member wishes to speak, I close the debate and call Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir. And I'd like to start by thanking everyone who has contributed to the debate. This is finely balanced, and that, sir, shows the importance of the decision that is before us. What is clear is that we are united in our commitment to delivering a hospital for islanders. What divides us is the extent to which we should commit the public's money to pay for it. Senator Farnham and the Council of Ministers argue that their project must keep pushing forward, whatever the cost. Scrutiny, however, have been advised that the outline business case is inadequate and doesn't provide the justification for a hospital of this size and scale. There's no workforce strategy, no accounting for running costs, no sustainability plan, no digital strategy, no estate strategy, and the costs could rise rather than fall. So, do we just get on with it, never mind the details, or do we behave like an intelligent client, take a considered approach, and push back on the very expensive team that are working on this project to ensure that this important building will meet the healthcare needs of islanders without risking our economic future? One of the many people who've stopped me to talk about this debate is a well-respected retired director of a local company. They stopped to say good luck with the amendment, I responded by saying that scrutiny is trying to be constructive. They responded, yes, but on this one, you have to destruct the plan before you can be constructive. Let's not forget that the island, along with the rest of the world, is recovering from the impact of a global pandemic. This has provoked enormous levels of expenditure, disrupted our workforce, and caused damage to the businesses that are the engine room of our economy. Speaking last week at the excellent Digital Jersey workshop, a partner from the highly respected consultancy firm McKinsey pronounced that in her view, nations would have to consider either a 50% increase in revenue or a 20% cut in service provision and expenditure. To recover from the damage of COVID, of course, let's not forget that our GDP and productivity fell by 10% last year. Members who've attended briefings about the government plan will have heard that it will be harder to make savings from 2022 and beyond because this government will have already committed the funds. So how will a future government address chronic staffing issues? How will a future health minister fund the Jersey Care model that seeks to offer more care in the community but lacks a plan to support the cost of it? The HIF, the Health Insurance Fund, will have already been raided at this rate, so where then? GPs are also seeing their numbers decline. People are struggling to get appointments now already for primary health care. Where is this going? So in these uncertain times, it's not a great moment to break with the prudent approach that has been the island's watchword for centuries. This is a serious decision. As Senator Mezek identified, this is about our appetite for debt, one of the ultimate political issues. It could be said to be a test. When the chips are down, will we act as the people who voted for us expect that we will? Members of the government have spent the debate clutching at straws rather than defending their inadequate outline business case. They've chosen to cling desperately to their argument that we must not delay at whatever cost. The government can't even agree on the point of delay. Yesterday, the Chief Minister stated that supporting this amendment would stop the project dead, whereas Senator Farnham and others simply talk of delay, perhaps 1 year, 2 years. I think I heard Senator Farnham say in his summing up, 3 years. Well, which one is it? It's simply not logical. The Assembly agreed the site in November last year, so the project has been worked up since that point, including getting the team together. If we're generous, that's taken 10 months to get to this point. So why would any further amendments cause significant delay? It appears, sir, that the Council of Ministers is slightly hysterical. This is not about delay anyway. In fact, the programme can keep moving forward. This is about protecting our budget and spending a justifiable amount on a project that is evidence-based. Do we want to see our strategic reserve continue to grow for future generations? Over the past 40 years, there have been peaks and troughs, but overall, there has been stellar growth in markets. Our reserves saw an average annual return of 4% over that period. We've heard from the Attorney General that there is no fallback if our finances experience a major correction. There will be no one to bail the island out. Therefore, we must maintain our strength to weather any storms that may be ahead and limit our borrowing. But as we all know, politics is not just about fitting things into boxes. It's about meeting the needs of a community, and healthcare is one of the critical services that we provide. Deputy Higgins is quite right. This hospital will be an asset for future generations, but it will not be an asset providing a return. And it will require work and further investment, probably around the time that the bond matures. Holding ministerial office, sir, is about being accountable, taking responsibility. It's not just about cutting ribbons and posing for the cameras. It's about decision-making and delivering on manifesto commitments for the island. Scrutiny have a job to do. We have sought the best possible advice, and that advice clearly indicates that there is a problem with this plan. Scrutiny have got their facts straight. What concerns us is that the government has not. Our report has identified that the government's proposal is itself arbitrary. It lacks justification and does not stand up to the level of expenditure that is being asked for. It lacks a number of key documents that should underpin it, such as the workforce plan, the digital strategy, the running costs. I went through them earlier. Senator Valois hit the nail on the head when she noted the importance of having a business case that informs decision making. It's that simple. Scrutiny is doing its job and drawing the issues to the attention of members. Our warning to those who offer unquestioning support to the government and their inadequate outline business case is that they would be a dereliction of duty. The Health Minister says, don't praise staff and then ignore their views. Well, he and his management team are ignoring the concerns of staff on a daily basis. As mentioned in the opening speech, there is trouble with the cost of living, and poor culture is what's driving staff away, not the building. Yesterday, the Chief Minister stated there is no staff shortage. Well, today, sir, operations are being cancelled once again due to staff shortages. Committing to massive debt and expenditure will only reduce the ability of government to resolve these issues. They will not solve them, which is why we are calling for restraint. I have also a message for the Housing Minister. If this government was genuinely serious about housing, sir, it would not have pushed to stop the development of Anne Court. It would not have torn up plans to convert Cyril Lamarcon House into key worker accommodation, instead to provide yet another block of offices. The Deputy says he doesn't want to see a delay of housing being provided at Les Quennevets. Well, sir, and I apologise, Deputy Tadia, but this hospital project is actually blocking the provision of housing on the old Les Quennevets school site. So don't talk to us about blocking the provision of housing. We do have to live with the decision that this Assembly will make today and the decision that we've made in relation to the site. Yes, the panel recognises, and I commit, that this site is a point of compromise in order to maintain the direction of travel. The Infrastructure Minister shared with us his desire to name the new hospital the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. That would be entirely appropriate, of course, but there is a word of caution. There are many hospitals that share that fine name. One of them in Glasgow was built for a similar amount as that which is being requested for sign-off if this amendment fails. That hospital, which was built for £842 million in 2015, is known as a super hospital. It has, sir, 1,677 beds. This lays bare the meaning of Curry and Brown's conclusion that the price tag for this hospital would be correct if the scale was of a similar nature as that hospital in Glasgow. We do not have clarity, sir, on the number of beds that the hospital will have, or even the exact number of square metres, which has changed by the day in the past few weeks. But what we can be certain is that although, yes, we do need to build an acute general hospital that can deliver a wide variety of treatments and procedures, we do not require a hospital of the scale of Glasgow's, and that is the conclusion of our advisors. It is pure logic that £550 million can deliver a hospital that will comfortably provide for the needs of our community. If I could just remind Deputy Guida that previous cheaper plans have provided for 100% of beds to be in single rooms with no open wards whatsoever. This plan, of course, is for 75% single rooms. I would like to correct also a couple of his assertions. Firstly, that the project doesn't have to be funded in full prior to the work starting. We did agree, sir, a new public finances law, if you remember, in 2019. So there is a provision in that law to reallocate funds. The sum no longer has to be set aside in full at the outset. And with regards to equipment, this project is calling for £56.3 million to use the Treasury Minister's words, state-of-the-art hospital. Yet, looking back at the OBC from 2017, the figure was 18.7 million. So what has caused that great difference? We simply don't know. Let's stick to the facts. Supporting the amendment should be simple. In fact, it's a win-win. There is plenty of time. There is another £11 million available to get the project to planning in 6 weeks. Architects divide major projects into stages. This project is currently at REBA stage 2 and progressing into stage 3. Once the planning application is in, it's then that the technical drawing stage begins, and that's when those wards, theatres, clinics and waiting areas will be designed at REBA stage 4. There will be 6 months to do that work. So remember, it has taken us only since November to get to the stage that we're at. There is plenty of time to progress without delay. The delay we would contest is blatant obfuscation. The Chief Minister looks to scrutiny to define the exact nature of the savings that can be found in this project. Perhaps he forgets that the Our Hospital team have already trimmed the design in a short period of time from 73,000 square metres to 65. And there remains a 15% area in that project for flexibility. And I identified in my opening speech that has many practical uses rather than being built space. Yet he doggedly claims that his plans are realistic and robust. Sir, just because a speaker makes an assertion, it does not make it factually correct. Those assertions need to be tested, and that is the role of scrutiny. The Deputy of St Peter also had a whole raft of unsubstantiated comment. One in particular that I must take the time to correct is the assertion of the Deputy that the comments from the Council of Ministers that Mott MacDonald are not reviewing the UK's new hospital outline business cases. The scrutiny advisors, Curry and Brown, are, as I said yesterday, the authors of 2 of the front-runner OBCs that are built for that building programme. So they have a clear understanding of the role of the other company in that project. Mott MacDonald are technical advisors. Scrutiny has considered the facts. They have been tested by experts who are leaders in their field. No, we haven't had official communication with the doctors and nurses. That's never allowed. But we have had plenty of unofficial contact. We know what they really think about the consultation process that has been run. We know that people attending those meetings often dread them. Many feel that they are shouted at, belittled and demeaned. Some of the clinicians who signed that letter last week also have concerns about the delivery of care today. They're worried about their staff and the management who do not listen. Our reports provide the facts on this project as it stands, and the findings of our expert advisors are very clear. The business case is not robust, it has failed to meet the Treasury Green Book guidance on many levels, and it does not justify the size and scale of the project. But there is a way forward. In fact, we can call this a win-win. The project can be met within an envelope of 550 million, and with that figure, borrowing can be reduced to 400 million. Using the government's own figures, the build cost is 311 million on the current 65,000 square metres. That includes the main building, mental health, knowledge centre, roads, demolition and car park. That leaves £240 million for contingency, inflation and site-specific costs. The government have spent £59.5 million so far, but they have failed to provide a breakdown of their spending to date. If they cannot run the project to this point without adequate accountability, we must ask how they will progress from here. The amendment provides some rigour and restraint that is clearly much needed and offer public finances greater protection. So let's be clear, we're not suggesting that reserves are plundered. We are saying that options to raise the money in different ways other than borrowing. We could use the £40 million from the Internet of Things sale. In fact, there should be more of that to come from that sale. What troubles the panel is the proposal to place borrowed money in a fund and hope that it makes a higher return is a big departure from the way things have always been done. The States is not an investment manager that uses borrowed money. I think the Deputy of St Mary was right when he said it was akin to an endowment mortgage. Remember the international finance crisis? Well, the banks failed because they had money on deposit and bet that they could make more than the interest rate. Sound familiar? The time has come to proceed with the project, yes, but at a sensible scale and achievable timeframe. If there reaches a point where additional funds are required, then the Treasury Minister can return to this Assembly and request them, if she can provide adequate justification. If I may quote from a former Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel amendment, the one for P130 in 2016, there are inherent dangers of borrowing large sums of money exacerbated by the uncertain economic climate. Let's be far-sighted and prudent, they said. Sir, I agree. Let's also mend our health service, rebuild a workforce, one that is happy and prosperous, ready to care for its patients and able to enjoy life in our beautiful island. So it was funny that Senator Farnham handed a gift to Deputy Ward earlier at the beginning of his speech. Firstly, the gift in itself, a crochet kit, reminded me of the people who, during the French Revolution, watched the aristocracy at the guillotine as they sat in the square knitting. I had a gift for Senator Farnham as well. Some shoelaces, because I know he likes running. I found them last night, and they say, just build it. But I have added my own comment, not at any cost. It's the view of the panel that not supporting this amendment would be irresponsible. It would allow this hospital project to become a mega project. Where will all the money come from for the next capital projects? How does the government plan to finance the delivery of sea defences, new schools, or any other crisis that might arise? We heard yesterday from the External Relations Minister that he will be amending the government plan and its proposal to borrow yet more money for other projects. There is still time for him to approach this project with some realism too. We can learn so much from our friends in Madeira. They are building a hospital for 375 million euros. Just like us, they have to meet the needs of their community with limited ability to travel elsewhere. Their population is more than double ours, so it can be done. And there is time for this project to move to RIBA 4 while the planning application is considered. If members accept the amendment of the Future Hospital Review Panel, we can deliver a hospital that we can all be proud of. We can monitor and contain costs in a steady fashion. We can make it accessible without having to bulldoze through a bowling green that has been enjoyed for a century. Remember, option 6 scored just 1 point below option 7 in those access routes. We can create a safe environment in which babies will come into the world, all manners of procedures can be completed, and yes, sir, it will be a place where difficult news can be shared in privacy, and when their time comes, people can die with dignity. Sir, I move the amendment.
Thank you, Senator. There's a request for a point of clarification from Deputy Higgins. Sure. Deputy Higgins?
Thank you, sir. Yes, I did ask Senator Moore, who is obviously the main proponent of this, to state whether she supports the hospital being at Overdale, or if there is a delay, she will revert to another site.
Sir, I thought I had clarified that point, but on behalf of the panel, that we recognise that there is a compromise to make on the site.
Thank you very much.
Doesn't answer the question.
We're now in a position to put a vote into the chat channel. The vote is available, so I ask members to cast their votes. I will allow as much time as possible to make sure everybody gets their chance. I would ask people not to vote in the chat if they voted in the link, please, because it will cause us problems. Members have had the opportunity to cast their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. And the amendment has been rejected. 25 votes contra in the link, 21 for, and then we have one each in the chat, and I suspect a duplicate.
Thank you, sir. Could we have the pause and the comment?
Okay.
Those voting in the chat link, those voting for, Senator Valois, Deputy Ward, Senator Ferguson, Connétable of St Martin, the Connétable of St Brelard, Deputy Gardner, Deputy Ayer, the Connétable of Grouville, Deputy Morel, the Deputy of St Martin, the Connétable of St John, Senator Mezek, Senator Moore, Senator Pallett, the Deputy of St Mary, Deputy Lehegarat, Deputy Tadier, Deputy Doublé, Deputy Alves, Deputy Southern, Deputy Pamplin. Those voting contre in the chat, Deputy Lewis, the Connétable of St Helier, Deputy Labby, Deputy Wickenden, Deputy Truscott, Deputy Martin, Deputy Guida, the Connétable of St Juan, Deputy Higgins, the Deputy of St John, the Deputy of Trinity, Senator Lafondre, the Connétable of Trinity, Senator Gorst, the Deputy of St Juan, the Connétable of St Clement, Senator Farnham, the Deputy of Grouville, the Connétable of St Lawrence, Deputy Young, the Deputy of St Peter, the Connétable of St Mary, the Connétable of St Peter, Deputy Ash and Deputy Pinnell.
Thank you very much. We now.
Sir, I didn't
Sorry,
hear my name read out as.
No,
and I didn't hear mine either.
And
So your name was Poor, I think.
in the comments earlier, we had Deputy Masson voting contre and the Connétable of St Saviour voting pour, and Senator Lafondre voted in both.
And Deputy Samari voted Poor on the list. So we now return to consideration of the main proposition. The debate is open. Does any member wish to speak on the main proposition? If no member wishes to speak,
Yes, please, sir. Sorry.
I need to see it through the chat, I'm afraid, otherwise
It's going to take a while.
but Constable Simplard. Oh, sorry, I've missed some chat messages. Well, Constable Simplard, I've called you, and the others I will pick up in a moment.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. There are missing elements in this project, particularly with regard to access and the road network. I have no intention of repeating the site selection debate, but I'm truly concerned that access to Overdale by not only my parishioners in St Brelard, but the whole west of the island just doesn't appear to have been considered. I make this point because I do envisage that a remodelling of the first tower junction will need to take place. I haven't identified any costs for this so far in the Minister's proposals, so I ask, where does that come from? I would have thought it would be easily costed. Likewise, there is still no information on the public transport provision to Overdale. Have the project team spoken to Liberty Bus? What is being proposed? How much will it cost? Is it in the programme? I want to know these details, and the lack of them really does undermine my confidence in the ability, as I've said before, of the project team to deliver what is right for Jersey. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Pamplin.
Thank you, sir. I won't turn my camera on this this stage. So I just wanted to add, after the amendment debate, what I didn't mention in my other speech, and that was now this is going forward, if voted for, the concerns I now raise about the Jersey care model. As a scrutiny member who's been scrutinising this for the last year and a half, it cannot fail. It has to progress, but it needs to be funded appropriately. Our staff who work and all across healthcare, right down to the porters, to the nurses, to the healthcare assistants, need to be paid better. We need to support our ambulance service. If this project goes forward, we need an ambulance service that can respond in the times needed. My grandmother waited far too long for an ambulance on that evening, the day before she sadly passed away. I do not want to see these things continue that I also mentioned in my previous speech. The inpatient facility at Orchard House is delayed. It's not good enough. The impact of mental health in young people that is coming down the line means that building this hospital is not going to fix those problems. We need to ensure there is another facility for young people. It is essential. I mention these things now because there is only a select few months left ahead of this assembly. There is only 3 of us on the scrutiny panel, and this is an assembly issue. This is not the end of things. The future is promising if this all comes to pass, and let's all hope it does, because the island deserves it. But I raise these concerns today. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Ash.
Thank you very much, sir. When we first sat round as a political oversight group and we got down to the last few sites that were there, which basically came down to People's Park probably and Overdale, I stated at the time that when we did the vote, whichever way it went, and to be honest, I was probably a People's Park person, I would then go with it because we had gone as far as we could in discussing and debating this issue, sir. And I know I tend to go to sporting analogies that people may or may not like, but I think today we've actually indulged in a great game of rugby where we've all got in there, we've all put our views, punches have been exchanged perhaps, and it's certainly been a rough and tumble, but the game is finished. We've now voted this through. And I would really, really now like to appeal to all states members. We've had the game. Now let's really get together. Let's all put our arms around each other and move on and get this hospital built for the people of the island because they deserve that. They've waited for 12 years for this now. The moment has come. Let's all of us now, in the vote we're about to have, demonstrate that we're all going to get behind it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Moore. Oh, sorry, I've lost my chat, so I forgot that you were ahead of the game there. Deputy Morale first.
Thank you, sir. Pleased to follow the last speaker, if only to say I might need some longer arms if we're going to get my arms around Deputy Ash. But
not an image we need at this time of the day. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I wanted to reiterate. I had thought I had considered long and hard about abstaining from the next vote, but on reflection, I think Deputy Ash is absolutely right. In this case, the financing, which was always an issue for me, I'm still not of the belief that Jersey's choosing the right direction or the states is choosing the right direction with the very large amount of borrowing. But that debate is now settled and we do need a hospital. And I think I started in my previous speech, I certainly meant to if I didn't, by saying that, others did, that there's no question this hospital needs to go on, it needs to be at Overdale at the moment. Whether there's tweaking that can happen, I hope so. And I hope Senator Farnham has has got the strength to carry on and to see, you know, please do try to bring final cost of that hospital down, please. You know, I think quite understandably, many islanders think, okay, there's hundreds of millions of contingency. It could be done for 600, 650, something like this. But we all have that sense that the construction firms involved will see the contingency and see that as just part of their budget. So please, I ask Senator Farnham, please do continue to challenge and try to bring the cost of that hospital down, because every million that we don't spend on that hospital is a million that can be spent elsewhere. And that's really important. And as Deputy Pamplin just said, we've got a whole issue with the care model now. We have, because of previous failures by the states to decide on a hospital sooner, we have a ridiculous situation where we're building a hospital without knowing the care model in there that's going in there. The states previously hadn't funded development of the care model. And so we don't actually know how Jersey's care system is going to work into the future. That's a massive issue. But it's not one that should stop the hospital going ahead now. And as I said to Senator Farnham just now, the finance debate is finished. That's one of the two issues I had. It's gone. The other issue is parking. And I will be challenging Senator Farnham on reducing the number of parking spaces available in that car park at the hospital site, because we really do not need 550 parking spaces for a hospital. And I strongly believe that. But I agree with Deputy Ash. Let's get behind this now, because we know there are plenty of us who aren't comfortable with the debt or the cost, but we do need to be comfortable with the need for a hospital. And so we do need to push forward with it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir. So the Assistant Treasury Minister might think that some of this political debate is more like a game, but sir, I hope the Deputy is aware that this is actually about lives. It's about the fundamental of the provision of healthcare that everybody wants to talk to us about when we campaign to represent them in this assembly. But sir, sadly, members of this government do behave like they belong to some sort of team. You know, it's all about who's on the team, who's not on the team, who can I cut a deal with, who can I have a chat with in the locker room. Sir, it's not about that. It's about what we're here to do and how we represent the people and the things that they care about. They care about the healthcare system. They care about the people who deliver that healthcare system. We know that people are struggling to get appointments with GPs. We know that theatres are being closed today and patients are having to be prioritised because there is a shortage of staff. So we should be working towards resolving those problems, and that, sir, has to be done through cutting our cloth accordingly. I appreciate and respect that it's clearly not the will of this assembly today, but the advice of our advisors was to refer this proposition back if, because it simply is not fit for purpose. And in fact, it risks doing harm to the island by basing such a huge expenditure on an inadequate outline business case. But so I will be voting against this proposition with regret, but I simply feel that it is an impossible thing to vote for, despite the fact that we do have to respect the will of the Assembly and we have to find a way to work together in the future. But receiving the letter last week from clinicians reminded me, of course, of the huge efforts of previous health ministers. It was Deputy Anne Pryke, as she was then 10 years ago, who listened to the concerns of clinicians, heard about the problems with the building and identified that indeed a new hospital had to be delivered for the island in order to provide the care that that very sincere deputy considered was important and vital to islanders. So Deputy Pryke set about a process. She got that ball rolling, and of course was thwarted at many occasions. partly due to clinicians and their involvement. So receiving that letter made me reflect really on the responsibilities that we all have in getting here. Of course, none of us took part in that debate on the site selection other than voting for the amendment. But clinicians have a responsibility for the delay that has been caused to date, just as each and every one of us has had a responsibility in the progress of this decision making to get us to this point. And so I, for one, am not comfortable with giving my vote to this proposal, however much I want to see a hospital delivered for the island. But of course, we know what the result of the debate will be today. And so I shall be, with regret, acknowledging my dissent. So the locker room is for team sports. Politics may require some teamwork, but not locker room tactics. And I really would urge members to work on the facts and to work with sincere passion and integrity as they continue their endeavours to the next election. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Councillor St Martin.
Thank you, sir. I'm obviously disappointed but not surprised the amendment lost by just a few votes. I hope that the government really listens to what has been said and is not dismissive of our real and genuine concerns, and takes into account and gives our views the respect that they really do deserve. We've had the vote and we all recognise that we desperately need the hospital. I've put my views across and I accept the vote, and therefore, with some difficulty, I will be voting for this proposition, with my fingers crossed. And I will be closely watching the spending on this project, and I expect far more transparency and integrity from this government. Thank you, sir.
Senator Ferguson.
Thank you, sir. Yes, we've had the vote, and unfortunately, sensible views have not prevailed. However, members will be aware of my views on what is needed as a health service in the island, and I sent members a summary of these last week. So while we're getting on with actually getting a hospital, please can we now turn our attention to making the system more efficient and improving productivity? It can be done painlessly. It's not done by cutting budgets, it's by working better. Which unfortunately is something that doesn't seem to have struck home with the management of the hospital at the moment, of the health service. So please can we actually look at this and get going on it? Thank you, sir.
Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. I need to ask if the proposer would agree to put this final proposition to the states in parts. I need to do that because my position as the Environment Minister, I think, requires me to, I would wish to be in a position to be able to abstain on Part E and F of the proposition. I'd just like to put those reasons on the record, if I may, sir. We've had the debate on funding, which is about Parts A and D, but Part E, particularly E1, sets out details of the development itself and the access to it, which I think are clearly matters for the planning application and inquiry. And also, but having said that, I would like to put on the record, sir, that Part E3, I have already advised in public in answers to questions that if the compulsory purchase powers are given to the Environment Minister, that I would not be prepared to complete the compulsory purchase procedure by serving the final third notice until after the planning application has been determined, sir. That has been my position all along, and I'd like that on the record. But obviously, I would need to formally abstain. And then on Part F, sir, particularly on Part F, A and C, whilst I agree with the intentions and spirit about maintaining green space, community and parking, I again feel that this would be subject to the application and subject to the planning inquiry, sir, and therefore I would need to record my abstention. But I can only do that, of course, if the proposer is prepared to put the vote in part, sir. Thank you. I'd just like that to be on the record. Thank you.
Constable of St Lawrence.
Thank you, sir. I do not expect the final cost to reach the maximum cost cap, let alone to exceed it, as specified in Part A of this proposition. If I am in the Assembly and we are asked to approve an increase, I doubt, sir, that I would support such a proposition. I ask Senator Farnham to tell us now, will there be accountability if it is not delivered within the expenditure cap as shown in Part A of this proposition? And if so, from whom? Who will be accountable? And that brings me on, sir, to a recommendation from the scrutiny panel advisors when they suggested that the government consider amending the Jersey finance law to impose a duty of accountability on the project senior responsible officer. And I ask Senator Farnham whether he will be looking to that recommendation and acting upon it. It comes back clearly, sir, to my question, who will be held accountable if the final cost for the Our Hospital project reaches or I should say exceeds, sir, the maximum of 804.5 million. And the other recommendation that I think he should consider, and I would like him to respond to, sir, is also a recommendation made by the scrutiny advisors, and that is to create a specific Our Hospital Reserve Fund. And I would like Senator Farnham to advise the Assembly whether he will be doing that, sir, and if not, why not? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Next to speak is the Constable of St Helier.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to follow the Planning Minister, Deputy Young, who asked for the vote to be taken in parts because clearly, as Constable of the parish, which is threatened with compulsory purchase, I will not be supporting that part of the proposition. I will, however, obviously be supporting the new Part F, which seeks to protect the parish's assets in terms of People's Park, the bowling club and so on. I also want to compliment Deputy Young because it may not have been the most barnstorming of the speeches today against the amendment, but it was certainly the one that changed my mind. And I think it did that because he really focused on the effect on the medical staff of a vote for the amendment. And that really struck me. It reminded me actually, sir, of one of those examinations one has to do when one reaches a certain age. I should say submit to when one reaches a certain age. And I was midway through this examination when the consultant asked me how I was going to be voting on the hospital. I felt he had me rather at his mercy because certainly at the time my concerns about how St Helier is treated by this and by previous governments was certainly leading me to vote for the amendment. I am still concerned, sir, that the government treats St Helier as a development site rather than as a parish. And I don't believe that other parishes have been treated in the same way as St Helier. And I do think there is a gap there. There is something that the Council of Ministers really needs to think hard about when it comes to what goes on in St Helier. But I will, sir, as I say, not be supporting the use of compulsory purchase. I do hope for everybody's sakes that we can negotiate an arrangement between government and parish that will be in everybody's best interests and that we won't go down a road which tends to make the only winners the lawyers. We've been down that road before, sir, as a parish during my time as constable, and I don't want to go down it again. So I do look forward to moving the project forward. As I said in my speech, which was, I think, the first speech on the amendment, I think people will look up at the new hospital in a few years' time, and it will be a beacon of hope and reassurance and consolation for islanders. And so I look forward to that happening. But I would ask the government, the Council of Ministers, to deal with St Helier as it will with the other 11 parishes, with respect and consideration. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. In terms of the proposition being taken in separate parts, that's a matter for the proposer. But in my view, parts A to D, which are about money, go together, and then E and F could also be subject to separate votes. But I don't think the separate paragraphs of A, B, C, and D can readily be separated and voted on. That's my view. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. And it's been a very long and fascinating few days with some speeches that have been at times quite surreal, one might feel, sat here and listening to some of the arguments that are put forward. And so the amendment has been rejected, and we are now set with a spending of £804 million, which I'll come back to. So I suppose I should start by thanking Senator Farnham for my gift. It's very good. He did make a fundamental error, which has a sort of an irony to it, in that the crochet needle that he bought was far too big for the wall that we had. I'll avoid the joke about my crochet needle being too big, being the story of my life. I won't say that. It's inappropriate. But sir, this is the concern. The spending, the level of borrowing is too big for what we actually will see in the end. And so I want to put a few things on record that I'm concerned about. So there's talking all around this assembly, a lot of things going on outside this chamber, where the negotiations are made and talk is engaged in by people. And there's a lot of talk of the real costs, and it's been mentioned by the Treasury Minister, by other people who have spoken in the debates, of this project being £650 million. And so what I don't want to see is next year, in a couple of months before the election, or a month before the election, a sudden announcement of, oh, by the way, we can do this for £650 million. Look what this government's done. Look what this party's done. We've saved you 150 to 200 million pounds. That is cynical use of government money and borrowing for the wrong reason. And I will put on record now that if that happens, I will call you out on that, because that is totally inappropriate when most of the arguments, sir, have been made around we cannot do this without borrowing this large amount of money right now. That is inappropriate. So, sir, we'll be keeping an eye on that, and I certainly will be keeping an eye on that. And so I understand, and I think there is I don't know how long it takes being in this assembly to be accepted as somebody who is in this assembly and actually knows about the processes of this assembly. Perhaps it's 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 terms before some members have the quality to accept members on an equal footing. But I do understand the notion of why this borrowing is happening, and I understand it sounds like a great idea. There isn't free money, there isn't a magic money tree, as a lot of people have said, because people will be repaying it. And unfortunately, and I will say this again, the history of this island and the history of its governments is that those who repay are probably the least able to repay. Those who suffer from austerity most are those who are less likely to be able to stand up and fight against it. Although I would urge people to go out and vote in the next election, and we may be able to do something about that, but we move on. So, sir, I think we need to be very careful in the way that we approach this. I'm disappointed that it's been such a divisive debate. And some of the debates have been about, even, sir, I think the processes in this assembly, well, we speak through the chair. I quite like that because it gives a direction to one's speech and we know where we are and it's equal. It's egalitarian, dare I say. But what we've had are individuals' names being used and that lack of respect for the position that they're in. And I think that's disappointing. And I don't want to be seeing that happening as we move on and move forward through the debates over this hospital. So it's clear that this will have effects on St Helier. St Helier, and it's already been mentioned that we free sites up for building, we free sites up for housing. And as the old Gloucester Street site goes, what will it be? Another large housing estate, the majority of which will not be affordable housing, because in the waterfront, it's the pitiful amount of 15% for affordable housing, which does nothing for young people and the future of this island. If that's what the plans are, that's one of the concerns I have. And I say to all in St Helier that we do have to look very carefully about the future plans for that. Because what could happen is we could be in a debt situation where we say, well, actually, we come back to the Assembly. We have no choice. We have to build these houses and have a large income from them in order to repay the debt that we've brought forward. And that's the way in which this happens. It's like a form of mission creep when one takes something on. And that concerns me massively about the future of St Helier. And so what we are doing by taking on this large debt, and this debate is about funding, not about where the hospital is. I voted for the hospital at Overdale without an issue because I believed it was the right place to go because it's future-proofed. And I mentioned one thing in this assembly, it won't be flooded in the next 10 or 20 years when climate change really kicks in and we have serious issues in some areas of this island. People seem to have their head in the sand about this issue, and I hope they can get their head out of that sand. So the issue is that we will be tying ourselves to a repayment of a debt from a fund that we will be told repeatedly in this assembly that we cannot touch. We can't touch the money from that. We've allocated it. That's what's paying for the hospital. And we've heard this so many times when we've talked about public sector pay, when we've talked about and the situation where people have sat here and said, we're worried about the medical staff, we're worried about hospital staff, nurses, but they've also sat in this assembly and voted against pay rises for those said staff. They've voted about improvement in terms of conditions for those staff. So I hope that's a step forward for you all who are taking on that argument. And the next time we come back and talk about that, then you will not vote in that way, that you will support staff. Not just theoretically 5-10 years into the future when we may have a new hospital built, but actually tangibly now when people are going out to work every day and wanting a proper wage for what they do so that they can have a decent living standard in this house and actually perhaps not move away. So there are issues about the future. And we will have to face up to the cost of climate change. The £300 million figure is nonsensical because we're not taking into account the cost of what we would replace with old technology. So that is a debate that has to be had. But one of the things we'll have to do there is come up with a way in which to pay with that. And my concern is that what we will do with some of these issues is we will use taxation in the form of regressive taxation. Because there is one thing that too many people in this assembly are addicted to, and that is regressive taxation. In the name of equality, everyone pays that tax without taking into account the inability to pay for some because they are poorer. And when I talk about poverty on this island, we include so many people who are struggling to get by, not just those on the lowest incomes, but many others who are working and young people who are paying astronomical housing, for example. And we all know about that. So, sir, I have huge concerns over the future of this and the decision that will be made inevitably here. So I want to be consistent and I would have a real problem voting for this, not because I don't want to see the hospital, not because I believe there will be a delay. I'm afraid those arguments frequently do not add up. We've seen that there's already, and we've heard that the planning application is ready for the 16th of November, that things are going forward. And so, sir, but we go back to old arguments and that argument has been lost now. So I make this request of the government of this island. Be open and honest about what you are doing with this huge amount of money. Do not play politics by the election, by suddenly saying, oh, by the way, it's okay. Because of our sound management, we managed to get the cost down by £200 million. So it's okay, everybody. We didn't need that money in the end anyway, because this debate will be long forgotten by then, long forgotten. But there's not many people who go back and read through Hansard. It's not particularly entertaining. So, sir, we are in a position now where we are about to vote, or this assembly is about to vote for the biggest increase in borrowing this island has ever faced, for a project that we are uncertain about in terms of the future of it, and for promises that are made from a government that I'm afraid does not have the vast majority of this assembly with it. And sir, leadership, in my opinion, is about taking people with you, even if they don't understand or see your view at the time. You convince them. As someone who's an educator, you have to take people to places they don't want to go with knowledge at times. They don't want to engage with it, but you work and you work and you work to bring them on side. I am not seeing that from this government. I'm seeing opposition, and indeed we're seeing this mentality, which I'm afraid I have to call out, is macho and inappropriate for a modern democracy. So I make a plea. Let's be more inclusive of people in this assembly and get them on side by being open and transparent and not personalising these debates in the way that I've done so here. I will, however, say thank you for the mention of reform constantly. I was seriously thinking of getting some sort of sponsorship for every time we're mentioned and putting that money towards some sort of political charity, because that would be appropriate, because we're getting the advertising. So I thank you for that. It's marvellous. Please keep it going. All power to your elbow, because we're here to stay and we're here to do the right thing. We're built upon principles and we will lead the way. And with proper governance of this island, this hospital would all be underway. We would know what the spend would be. We'll be in control of that spend. And I am still not convinced that is going to happen. So we'll be keeping a very close eye on what's going on here. And I ask you again, as a government, please be transparent with this assembly and inclusive in what you're spending. And do not try and play the silly political game near the election. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Deputy Maston.
Thank you, sir. As members will recall, earlier in the start of this term, I was an assistant minister in the health department. The area which I oversaw was POG, the people and organisational development part of that function, which I performed for the minister. And that again was to do with the professional development issues kind of within health. And so what is exciting, and you know, we are talking about the funding here, but what is exciting, which members might find interesting, is that today we have the highest number of trainee nurses that we have ever had in Jersey, coming to 54 currently within our cohort. And I think that's great news. But what we do know is that they desperately need better facilities to train in. And that is what this project is about, because in order to carry on with a good health service, it is about staff. Yes, absolutely are important, but the staff need the decent facilities in order to perform in. So they go hand in hand. And of course, through the last debate, it was all about recruitment and retention, about staff within the service, and that on our risk register, one of the biggest problems in order to retrain staff was about the facilities. And so it makes me very, very disappointed to hear members like Deputy Ward talking about how, you know, we don't care about the staff, when in fact many of us do. I also feel that as a minister, as an assistant minister, I've always been as open and transparent, as accountable as I could be or could have been. And so I feel sometimes I don't necessarily always live in the same world sometimes. And so I would say, regarding the points that Deputy Ward made about a pay rise, actually, no, the vote wasn't on a pay rise. It was about changing the financial envelopes in order to allow negotiations to occur. As I recall, one I supported, one I didn't. So I don't appreciate having that thrown in at this last minute either. So this is about the financing, though, of the hospital for the people of Jersey. It's so important that we support support the Assembly in getting this done, because this isn't a project of the government alone. This is a project for everyone, which we all know is so important in order to be achieved. I, like any other island, are very, very concerned about the costings of this project, but there's something which we all need to recognise. And one of the biggest problems and one of the biggest risks in this project has always been political risk, and that is interference for one way or another. And it's been, of course, it's very difficult because members of the Assembly will say, well, that needs to be accountability, and there absolutely needs to be accountability. But at the same time, having propositions lodged in, from one area or another does destabilise the project. So as I think Deputy Ash hit the nail on the head when he spoke, this is something which I hope now we can all get behind, all support for our staff and for our people. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Deputy Southern.
Thank you, sir. And briefly, I just want to mention a concern of mine that I have. This, for me, marks a change in the nature of the borrowing that we've come to. Previously, we borrowed in order to fund housing, which provides automatically an income stream with which you can service the borrowing. In this particular case, I'm worried about the size of the borrowing. In particular, should we get into trouble with the size of the borrowing, should we find it difficult to pay off, then it might be that what we end up doing is charging rather than having free medical services. And if that were to happen, I think that would be a backward step. At the moment, treatment in the hospital is free. In the community, in primary care, it's not. If we were to see the expansion of privatisation, call it what you like, outsourcing, for example, in physiotherapy, then we could see a move to actually charging for medical services, which currently are free and should remain free, I believe. So just a little warning, little flashing light, in my view, says, and beware, sometime down the line, we may end up charging services that we shouldn't be.
Thank you, Deputy Pinnell.
Thank you, sir. In response to the previous few speakers, I do think the finance debate has been resolved. I will just say that as I'm known the tight Jersey girl, I will monitor the expenditure extremely closely, and I continue to defend the decision that we have made today not to use the reserves. The monies retained and invested in the strategic reserve and transferred out as and when required, the remaining borrowing remains invested until spent. The integrity and purpose of the strategic reserve is still preserved. So that's all I wanted to say to reassure members of the Assembly and, of course, Islanders. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy of St Peter.
Yes, sir, thank you. And I will speak as a member of the Political Oversight Group. We will continue to take the tough decisions. We are effectively the first line of scrutiny. We challenge at every single stage, which isn't often seen in the public, and we will continue to drive for the most suitable hospital in this island. And I can give the assurance that we keep a very close eye on the pounds, not the pennies. I would also just quietly like to, seems an eternity ago, the Constable of St Martin spoke, and she said, whatever the outcome, believe, let us be united about that and work together towards delivering this hospital. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Senator Misick.
Thank you, sir. You never know what's going to happen when it gets to this point in a debate. The Treasury Minister has just said, I apologise if I'm misquoting her, but I don't think I am, that this finance issue has been resolved. I think she used the word resolved. Let's just be clear that that is not the case right at this very moment, because we haven't cast our verdict on this final proposition as amended. And I kind of don't like the defeatism you sometimes hear from members after a very long debate where we've had a big debate on an amendment, and then when that amendment is dealt with one way or another, some members seem to reconcile themselves to the defeat and will then vote in favour, even though they may well have perfectly good reasons for not wanting to see their name attached to the final proposition. And that's what puts us in I think, a very difficult position with this unamended proposition. And I know that I speak certainly for my party when I say that we are absolutely determined that the issue of the new hospital in Jersey must be resolved. It has been a disgrace that it's taken us 10 years to get to this point, and I don't want to lay that blame at any individual, because I consider it a systemic problem that has had successive assemblies go round in circles on this, go through all the effort of coming up with a hospital project, only to then throw it in the bin and start all over again, and leave us in this position where we have spent over £50 million with, at this point, absolutely nothing to show for it. And we're in a position now where the current hospital has it risks reaching a point very soon of such deterioration that the conditions that patients would suffer in there are not those which any reasonable person would be prepared to see them go through. And we don't have a lot of time to get to a point where we can secure everything in its final form to go ahead with the hospital without that, without risking things getting worse and deteriorating further in the current hospital site. And it is a disgrace that it got to that point. And I'm pleased to say that I think that at certain parts in this journey, that my party has offered advice that has been ignored that would have seen us in a better position by this point. We told the previous government that they were completely wrong from the start to ever have People's Park on the list of potential sites for the hospital. They eventually relented on that, but they should have shown stronger political leadership and recognised that they were onto nothing there. They always were onto nothing there. And had we not had that sideshow with that debate and that campaign, they could have saved time and money reaching a conclusion earlier. And when that conclusion was made, my party supported it with a degree of reluctance, because we don't believe that there's a perfect solution to this, but we haven't wanted to be obstructive so long as what's pursued is not one that leaves St Helier shortchanged without the open green space that it so desperately needs. And then, sir, in this iteration of the hospital programme, we wasted a huge amount of time and money in pursuing that other shortlist, which included St Andrews Park, which was clearly a non-starter, and then by whittling it down again to People's Park and Overdale, which itself was clearly a non-starter. And I did say to ministerial colleagues at the time, and I remember giving the officers who came to present to us a very hard time on this, for which I attempted to apologise for when we finally did settle on the Overdale site, that we wasted time and money there. And with stronger political leadership, in actual fact, a government from the outset should have just held its hand up and said, there's no perfect site for this. We reckon probably the best one, though, is Overdale, so let's just get on with it. And we could have been in the position we're in today a couple of years earlier. And then those questions that many of us do still have about the funding could have had more time to be dealt with without this feeling of resentment that a gun's being held to our head, or a banana in a sock being held to our head, as was suggested earlier. And this whole debate could have been dealt with much more collegiately. And in fact, it may well have been a good opportunity to give the government pause for thought to then come back with a reprofiled proposal, as I think has been suggested, to limit the amount of borrowing that we're having to undertake now, and that would have been much better. And so I say to the government that I hope they've learned the lessons from that, and I'm optimistic that they have, because at least 10 of them have signed up to a form of government reform which will see decisions made much quicker in future. There'll be the wrong decisions if one particular party carries on in government, but at least there'll be decisions. But if a better government is formed after the next election, one that leans more towards the centre left and will have a much stronger social conscience, I can assure members that that will be one that will also be prudent with public finances and make sure that we spend money as best as possible for the public who we represent, and who will not U-turn on the hospital project and go back to the start again, as some are suggesting, which would be bad value for money for the public, but who would ensure that every penny spent does have value for money, and that those elements of the spending that will not be committed to by that point can and will be looked at again to ensure that this project proceeds properly and in a way that we can have confidence that the money is being spent properly. But as Deputy Southern said before, this is a new era for Jersey in taking on these large amounts of borrowing. And we have maintained since our inception that Jersey's tax and spend model is broken. It's not delivering us the public services that we need to provide the quality of life that our constituents deserve. And we're not raising revenue in progressive ways, which are supporting those on lower incomes and asking those with broader shoulders to carry more of the burden. And that is something that must change. And this moment now of changing what has been a long-standing Jersey tradition in not getting into too much debt must be one that other cultural changes come about politically because of, and recognising that our way of raising revenue in this island is broken, and our attitude towards how we spend it is broken too. So, those are the main points I wish to make at the end of this very long debate. And I maintain our position that we are still in an unsatisfactory position, and that those who will lead this project as it develops should attempt to do much better than has been done up until now.
Deputy Legro.
Thank you, sir. The Treasury Minister has just said that the money will remain the 756 million until it is all spent. And it is on that I would like the Deputy Chief Minister, who's responsible for always the lead for this project, to confirm one thing for me and for anybody else that may be listening, that if there are funds left at the end of this project, and everybody may say that that's very unlikely, but what I would hope is that this money will be used for nothing other than what it is actually being asked for, and that is the hospital, that it won't be utilised for any other purpose and fill any gaps that may or may not come in weeks coming in relation to the government plan. So when there's a vote later this afternoon for 756 million of borrowing, that actually that money will only be used for this future hospital, and if there is any left, whether it will be sitting there for any possible future shortages that there may be. I would also like the Chief Minister, Deputy Chief Minister, apologies, for us to say, sir, today, is where some of the services are going to go after Le Caneve. And for me, sir, the child development unit and therapy unit that we visited last week is an excellent facility. And they are going to Le Caneve for 5 years and have no idea where they will return. What I ask of this political oversight group is that before those people are moved out of Overdale and before they go to Le Caneve, because that site's not ready for them to move into yet, that they know where they're going back to, because the uncertainty for any of these services is not acceptable. And this is putting children first, sir. So I would ask that the Deputy Chief Minister looks at that and ensures that before those services move, they know where they're coming back to. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? no other member wishes to speak on the proposition, I call Senator Farnham.
Thank you, sir, and thank you to all members that have spoken. I wanted to start with Constable Brellard. I couldn't quite hear everything he said, but I got the gist of it, and I would extend my apologies if there has been problems with the communication and the process that's currently ongoing with the parish and the team in relation to the decant and the move to Kennerby. And perhaps I could give way to the Conotab so he could clarify.
I thank the Minister, sir, and my reference was to access to the new Overdale from the west of the island. I'm quite satisfied with the progress that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you for clarifying. Thank the Conotab for clarifying. And yes, one of the reasons why option 7 was selected because it provided the best all-round access. So there are large numbers there'd be large traffic movements to and from the west. So, but I'm happy to arrange a separate meeting with the constable to go through the finer points of that, sir. The Constable of St Lawrence. First of all, about accountability. Well, of course, we all have accountability in this assembly for the decisions we make in this assembly, and the government has accountability for the executive decisions they make. So part of the government team is the political oversight group that manages our hospital projects and reports back to the council of ministers, who in turn report back to the assembly, sir, and come to the assembly for the key decisions. So if I think the Conotab's question was, who do we hold accountable if the project goes over budget? Well, ultimately, you would hold accountable the government because it's a government project. I expect, and I am prepared as I lead the hospital oversight group, to be held accountable for the project. Who will be accountable? Who will be in the lead on the project in the new government? Ma'am, it's hard to say at this stage, but I think I want to be clear: the accountability for the executive government, the executive roles performed in these sort of projects, lies with the government and the oversight group. The Conotab also asked to consider 2 recommendations. One was in relation to our hospital reserve fund. I'm not sure what the thinking is on that. We are prepared to consider scrutiny recommendations, and that's something that will have to be considered with the Treasury. Could the Constable Conotab just remind me, please, of the other question she asked? I think it might have been in relation to investment strategy.
Sir, if I may, sir, just to help the minister, my question was the second part of my question was whether the Deputy Chief Minister would consider amending the Jersey finance law to impose a duty of accountability on the project senior responsible officer, effectively, sir, to make accountable an officer rather than accountability remaining solely with the government and the executive. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you to the Conotab for confirming that. I'm not sure if that's necessary, actually, because from an office perspective, we do have two senior officers, 2 Director Generals leading the project, both of whom are accountable officers. So we can certainly take that back, but I believe we do have full accountability from an officer perspective already. Deputy Ward spoke about the future of the debt, and I want to try to reassure Deputy Ward and all other members that we will not borrow more than we absolutely need, and we will not utilize more than we need. I mean, I understand, I hear loud and clear concerns of the members, and we need to learn as an oversight group. We will listen and learn from the debate today on this. We want to bring people with us. We want to try to bring people with us. Some people, I'm afraid, it's impossible to bring with us. We know that, but we won't stop trying to build confidence in this. We know we will never get 100% support, but we will continue to try to be as inclusive as we possibly can. We know we have to continue to maintain the Assembly's support on these important decisions. I'm not sure I understood the deputies' comments in relation to trying to make any more savings on the hospital project. I'm not sure how. I'm trying to work that out in relation. We want to drive down the cost of the project, as Deputy Morell said. We want to drive down the cost, but don't misinterpret that for trying to make savings for other political reasons. I'm having trouble sort of reconciling those 2 points, but I can assure Deputy Ward and Deputy Morell members that we will do everything we can to deliver the project that we need for the best possible price. I think Deputy Massard, I'd thank him for his short speech, and he covered in his comments and provided some important clarity around some current staff facts and some figures around the finances. So I thank him for that. I mean, Senator Mezek raised a point about the selection process, and actually, I wish we could have just had a vote in the room and said, let's go with that site, because Senator Mezek was around the table at that time. And Overdale, I think, has always been a key contender right through the whole process, whether it's a dual site or single site, sir. But in reality, we couldn't do that because we would severely compromise the planning process, and the planning inspector would just kick it out and say, I'm sorry, you haven't given due consideration to the site. And of course, those people in the Westmount area who didn't want it there, we would give them, by not having run through a process for site selection, we could have given grounds a strong legal challenge, which could have delayed the project by a lot longer than the threat we faced earlier today. I can assure Deputy Lehegra that we will only use funds borrowed for the hospital. And I'm not sure I can read my notes on the second question. Yes, the child development. Thank you, Deputy. Child development unit have asked specifically not to go back to Overdale or be part of the new hospital project, and we respect that, and we will work very closely with them to ensure they are properly housed and located in line with what they're asking for. I'm not sure we can find a site prior to them moving out of Overdale. I mean, but we have 5 years to work with them on that, to create a bespoke unit for this absolutely vital service. But I wanted to be clear that it was their choice. They would have been welcome at Overdale New Health Estate if they want to do it. It's their choice to be separate from that, and we'll honour that for them. So thank you to all of the members that have spoken, and I'm looking at the time, and you'll be pleased I'm not going to deal with the 11 pages of my speech, but I will just go to the end, really, because it's been a very long couple of days, and I wanted to to thank not just all members for a really passionate debate. In all of my time in the Assembly, I think I've heard some of the most passionate and thought-provoking speeches that I've ever heard. I want to thank all members. I want to thank Scrutiny. So I want to thank the Scrutiny panel. They have given us a really tough time and a tough challenge. I want to particularly thank their advisors for the work they've done, because they did ask and we provided them with large amounts of information, and they were patient with us, with our team working practically round the clock. We didn't always meet their deadlines, but we got there in the end, and they got their reports done in time for this debate, for which I thank them. And I would just give a commitment to Scrutiny that we will continue to work with them. We expect to be scrutinised, but also an appeal to them as well to work with us where we can, and where we can sit down and discuss compromises together. And that would be extremely helpful to do. I want to thank the excellent team of officers we have, who also work extraordinary hours to get this project done, to maintain its momentum. Majority of our officers, outside of those who purely focus on the project itself, well, it's a majority of the team, but we have a number of officers and our DGs that are working the project as well as their other alongside their other responsibilities. I can't thank them enough. And I also want to thank the committed members of our hospital political oversight group for the extraordinary work they've done on the project. We have ran, in my belief, an exceptional process, and I'm sorry we haven't conveyed that process to all members, but we'll learn from that. We will learn from that. But we have been following exceptionally, I think, tight schedules, and we have been pushing back hard. The minutes might not represent that according to the Council of St John, but we have been challenging and we have been pushing back hard, and we will continue to do so for the remainder of the project to ensure we get the very best facilities, the very best value, and the very best care for islanders. And this is not just about now and today's debate. We have a big hurdle ahead of us. We have the planning process to go through. And again, I would ask the opponents of the project, please, now to think about coming on side with the project. Please try not to use the planning process to stop it. Use the planning process for what it's there for constructive way forward to develop the property. This is about the next 40 years. It's about the next 10 governments. It's about future generations. It's about those who come after us and those who depend on our wise choices now to secure their health and to secure their future. Thank you, ma'am. I make the proposition.
Senator Farnham, you were asked earlier about how you wish to take the proposition for voting purposes.
Yes, I'm very happy to take A to D and E and F separately.
Very well. In a moment, the greffier will place a vote in the chat for paragraphs A to D. The vote is now in the chat. I encourage members to cast their votes, please. Those who are unable to do so, if they could indicate in the chat as soon as possible. All members have had an opportunity to cast their vote. I ask the greffier to close the voting. And the proposition has been adopted. There were 29 votes for in the chat and a further 3 in the actual chat link, and 14 votes contre and 1 abstention.
Can we have the abstention, please?
Yeah.
And the quant, please.
The members voting contre, Deputy Ward and Deputy Tadier, Deputy Lahegara, Deputy Ayer, Senator Pallett, Senator Ferguson, Senator Mezek, Deputy Southern, Senator Moore, Deputy St Martin, Deputy Alves, Constable St Brillard, the Gardner, the Constable St John, and the Deputy of St Mary abstained.
Do you wish to take paragraph E separately or paragraph
I
E
think,
and F together?
Ma'am, we need to take paragraphs E separately to accommodate the request of the constable.
Okay, wait 1 moment for the graphic to reset the voting. On its own, yeah. The voting link is now in the chat. Encourage members to cast their votes. Yeah. All members have had an opportunity to cast their votes. Then I ask the graphier to close the voting. I can announce that paragraph E has been adopted. There were 35 votes in the link and a further 1 in the chat, 9 votes contra and a further 1 in the chat, and 2 abstentions.
We have the contra and the abstention, please, ma'am.
Graphier.
The members voting contre, Deputy Ayer, Deputy Lahegara, the Constable St Martin, Senator Moore, Deputy Gardner, the Constable St Helier, Constable St John, Constable St Brillard, Constable St Clement, and the abstentions, Deputy Young and Senator Ferguson.
And a further vote contra in the chat from the Constable St Saviour. Now reset the system, and members shortly will be able to vote on paragraph F. Vote is now available. Members cast their vote. All members have had an opportunity to cast their votes. I ask the graphic to close the voting. And the proposition for paragraph F has been carried. There were 42 votes for in the link and a further 2 in the chat, 1 vote cont and 1 abstention.
Move the cont, please.
The member voting cont, Deputy Gardner.
Very well, there has been an indication in the chat
I propose the adjournment.
for the adjournment. Is that proposition seconded? Then the Assembly stands adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning.